Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Governance Committee. It's Friday morning at 9 a.m. Glad to see everyone. Hope you've all had your coffee, tea, or whatever you need to be awake and alert for the last day of our CalSTRS board meeting. So welcome, everyone. Braden, can you go ahead and take the roll for us?
Yes. Ms. Bradford?
Good morning, here.
Mr. Prezant?
Here.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Here.
Representing the Director of Finance, Ms. Miller?
This is Jennifer Whitaker. I don't know that Gail is going to be here today, so I'll go ahead and cover for.
My apologies, Ms.
No
Whitaker.
worries. Present.
Thank you. Representing the State Treasurer, Mr. Rufino?
Present.
Representing the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mr. Yamanaka?
Here.
Controller Yi?
Here.
Chairperson Hendricks, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Braden. I also wanted to mention that the board will have a 10-minute public comment period at the end of each agenda item. Public comment after each item will be limited to the agenda item topic. There'll be additional opportunity for statements for the public for items not pertaining to a specific agenda item at the end of the open session meeting. Individuals wishing to speak to the board at the board web conference should dial into the public comment line, which is 833-986-0555, and wait in the call-in queue. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes for their presentation. If there's not enough time for speakers to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. Teachers' retirement board meetings are live web streamed and video archived, which are available to the public on calstrs.com. To protect the privacy of minors who wish to address the board, public commenters under the age of 18 only state their name and affiliated organization, but do not share any personal identifying information such as last name, age, or school. Great. And with that, we will move to item 2, which is, item 1, which is approval of the agenda.
I'll move approval, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Gail. And Karen seconding. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for leading the charge. Opposed? Okay. Abstentions? Great. So our agenda is approved. Our second item is approval of the minutes. The last time our governance committee, this feels like a lifetime ago, was back in January 28th of 2021. So I'd entertain a motion to approve our minutes from January.
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? All right, great. Our minutes have been approved. Thanks, everyone. So we're moving to item 3, and we're really looking forward to the conversation today. I think, you know, there are so many incredible boards out there that are fiduciaries of members' retirement dollars, and we're lucky enough to have relationships through our different leadership roles on our board and just through relationships we've developed over the years. And so we're excited to have an international peer pension panel today. And really this conversation came out of Betty and I and others talking about, I think it's an ongoing theme for us around our focus on ESG and sustainability has been, you know, the last 20, 30 years. It's been part of the CalSTRS culture. It's what we're known for. And I think more recently, some of the questions around how do we as a board provide oversight, and how does that influence our governance structure as a board? And how do we make sure that we as a board are providing the appropriate oversight around ESG and sustainability? On the enterprise, we typically hear about it on investments, and then we hear about it kind of through Jack and CalSTRS as an organization. How do we provide kind of a general oversight on ESG and sustainability moving forward? What's the board's role? You know, some of the challenges that we've been facing, other boards have faced as well in terms of compensation and benchmarking on sustainability and things like that. So really looking forward to the conversation today, and I'm going to pass it over to Betty for a few additional comments, and then she'll pass it to Amy and we'll get the panel started. So Betty.
Great. Thanks, Sharon, very much. Good morning, everyone. You know, as I think about this topic, which has been with us for quite some time, you know, at its most fundamental level, ESG just seems like a really simple concept, right? That emanates from the recognition that companies and institutional investors can't ignore the new risks that environmental and social changes pose to our traditional understanding of economic and investment risk. So, and I think one need to look no further than the impacts of climate change across the major economic sectors around the globe. And these economic and social variables not long ago were considered to be kind of one-offs or extraneous, where ESG factors were considered almost like barriers to meeting our fiduciary duty. And we've been seeing this evolution on the part of companies and institutional investors, financial regulators as well, with respect to the integration of ESG in investment practice and decision-making. And such that fiduciary duty requires us to incorporate all of the drivers of value, including ESG. So this evolution has not been void of challenges, and I'm just really grateful to our international panel of presenters today. Ava with AP2, Bertrand and Catherine with CDPQ, thank you so much for being here with us. And thank you to Amy McDuffie and Catherine Jackson with Mosaic for really pulling this session together, and really happy that Catherine will be leading this. So I'll turn it over to them at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Amy McDuffie, with the Governance Advisor. It's always a pleasure to be here, but in particular this morning, because we do have this panel to offer up insights and perspectives for you this morning. Since I know Catherine Jackson so well, and she's made a cameo with this committee in the past, I thought I'd share a bit about her biography is in your package, but she's based in Toronto and she's been my colleague for the last several years in joining forces to be advocates for good governance in the public pension community here in the US as well as internationally. So for those of you who were on this committee and on the board back in 2016, that might be where you remember seeing Catherine. At the time, she was an instructor for the Rotman Board Effectiveness Program. And I had asked her to come and speak with the committee about best practices in trustee onboarding, education, development. And you may recall that some of those practices were integrated into the foundational framing of what is now the CalSTRS new trustee onboarding program. So suffice it to say, I know the committee was impressed with Catherine at that time, as was I, just with the insights that she offered from the international public pension community. So after that session, I kept in touch with Catherine, and as you can see in her bio, you'll see why. She has decades of experience working in the international public pension community, not only in traditional governance matters, but she has a true special talent in the area of the governance of ESG and sustainability. So that is her superpower. She'll be sharing that with you today. And again, I was just so fortunate to be able to join forces with Catherine in 2019. We've been working together here in the US and internationally since then. And Catherine, it's just such a pleasure to have you as my colleague and to have you leading this conversation this morning. After being in this community for nearly 25 years, I couldn't think of anyone more qualified to lead this conversation for this committee. So welcome back. Welcome to our panelists. I'll turn it over to you to introduce our guests.
Oh, thanks, Amy. I think everyone that works with Amy can't help but fall in love with her on some level, and I'm guilty as charged. So Madam Chair and Vice Chair, members of the Board Governance Committee and observers, it's my pleasure today to introduce our speakers and our funds to you. You have received their bios, but I'll give you a bit of a brief introduction to you now about them. So we have two international funds represented. Ms. Eva Halvarsson is the CEO of the second Swedish National Pension Fund, or AP2. With assets of under management of approximately 50 billion US, AP2 is one of Northern Europe's largest pension funds. Eva began her career as an accountant. She worked for the Swedish government, where she helped to put into effect the Swedish Corporate Governance Code. She has served on, and indeed continues to serve on, the boards of public and private enterprises and corporations. Eva has been the CEO of AP2 since 2006. And she also currently serves on the board of the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, alongside your chair, Ms. Hendrick. So welcome, Eva. And Mr. Bertrand Milot and Ms. Catherine Samard are here representing La Caisse de dépôt du Québec, or CDPQ. CDPQ currently has assets under management of approximately $305 billion US. They manage the funds for 42 organizations, primarily pensions and insurance plans. Bertrand within CDPQ wears 2 hats. He is the Vice President Risk Management of Fixed Income and also the head of Climate Risk and Issues. So prior to joining CDPQ, Bertrand led a fund that invested in emerging markets, and he also has experience in infrastructure project finance. He was one of the architects and is one of the architects of CDPQ's climate change strategy. And as such, he's responsible for the design and implementation of CDPQ's policies in respect of climate change. Catherine is CDPQ's Director of Stewardship and Investing. Her team ensures that ESG factors are considered in investment analyses and act as a resource for the investment teams, in addition to executing on the stewardship mandate for the fund. Catherine is a securities lawyer, having practiced at an international law firm, Norton Rose Fulbright, before joining CDPQ. She has a master's degree in international business law from the London School of Economics and Political Science. And she's an award winner there for having achieved some of the highest marks. So welcome to both Bertrand and Catherine. One of the things I just wanted to keep in mind as we progress through our discussion here today is that different markets clearly have different regulatory requirements. Each fund also has to contend with its own operating environment. So while there are differences among our funds here and the organizations, it can be instructive to hear what others are doing, and then you can take what fits for purpose within your own fund. Also, when we refer to sustainability as we move forward, we are actually using the term interchangeably with ESG. Actually, I don't think you did mention this, Chair Hendricks, but we are going to go through the process of having a discussion here now amongst the panelists. I'll be asking some questions, they'll be responding. We have time left, about 15 minutes for conversations from the board members. So we'll proceed on that basis if that's okay. And on behalf of Chair Hendricks, if you can note your questions as you're going through, we'll be more than happy to answer them at the end of the conversation. Wonderful. So thank you. Let's begin. We have several topics. The first will be principally around the board's role and how the board has evolved in terms of its oversight responsibilities. And the first conversation is directed at Ava. Ava, please, could you give us a little bit of background on how AP2's board considers sustainability in the context of its fiduciary duty?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really look forward to this, hearing from my colleagues all around the world about how they go about this important issue. Maybe I should just start by saying a few words on our board. It consists of 9 members. All of them are appointed by the government, and 2 of them are nominated by the employee organizations. 2 are nominated by the employer's organization, and the rest is independent, but they are appointed, all of them, by the government. And when it comes to our fiduciary duty, or the board's fiduciary duty, it's very clear in the law that the mission of the AP funds, there are 4 of them, similar like us, from the Swedish Parliament, is to be of greatest possible benefit to the pension system. And it also says in the law that the fund is to be managed in an exemplary way through responsible investments and responsible ownership. So the funds shall promote sustainable development without compromising the mission of being of greatest possible benefit to the pension system. So 2 sides of the coin there. And I can add that the wording about responsible investments, etc., was put into the law 2 years ago. But before that, it was part of the preamble to the law. So according to me, not much has changed. But if you would ask someone at the Ministry of Finance, they would probably say that a lot has changed. But for me, having worked with this for 15 years, I would say it's quite the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. Jonathan, could we please have the slides up for the next question? Thank you. Could you advance it by 1, please? Thank you. So this question is also directed at Ava at AP2, and this is a slide from their sustainability report, which demonstrates the delineation of duties between the executive management team and the board. But Ava, could you please describe for us what the board's role is and how it's evolved over the past 10 years or so?
Yes, I'll start with present. Both board's most important decision, and that has been the same for ever since the start, is to decide on the operational plan for the fund. And that contains our asset allocation, our choices of benchmark indices, our plan for handling of risk, and it also includes deciding on a sustainability policy, a corporate governance policy, and the human rights policy. And of course, to follow up on those things. But 10 years ago, there was no, nowadays, for the last 8 years, we have a fixed, for every board meeting, we talk about sustainability. We have been lately discussing removing that issue because we talk about sustainability at all issues on the agenda, actually. But 10 years ago, there was no fixed agenda item for ESG. And the board at that time talked more about corporate governance issues than they talked about climate, or as we do nowadays, talk a lot about human rights issues. And some years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago, we reviewed the structure for all of our work on ESG, and we started by inventing and changing our investment beliefs. We went on to create principles for sustainability and moving on to bring forward a policy for sustainability. Of all those 3 items were decided by the board. And then it's up to me and my colleagues in the organization to decide on a strategy for sustainability. And that's the way it has evolved over time. So we are much more structured nowadays.
Thank you, Eva. That's quite interesting that that you've become so much more structured. And in fact, you're looking at taking it off the agenda because it's become such an integral part of every agenda item. I think that's really interesting. For the purpose of everyone being able to see everyone, Jonathan, would it be okay if we took the slide temporarily down? Thank you. And I'd like to ask this question of Kathleen now around the role of the CDPQ board in respect of ESG, and if you could speak to any changes that have happened.
I think Bertrand will give us an overview of the background.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody, or morning, and thank you for having invited us. We started in ESG about 25 years ago in 1994 with our first proxy voting policy. And this is important because for this reason, the subcommittee of the board that oversees ESG is actually the governance and ethics committee of the board. It started really with a legal angle, but it is now much more than just that. Over time, we became founding member of the PRI in 2006, a number of organizations, CIRAS in 2019 or 18, I believe. We launched our climate policy in 2017, and all these things are embedded in various policies that the board has approved. We have a sustainability policy, we have a climate policy, we have still a proxy voting policy, which are being updated regularly and reviewed. That process is driven by management, which makes recommendations to the board. So those policies are written in-house by us, recommended to the board, and the board approves them. Hopefully, we have discussions. One thing that has changed over the last 10 years, I should say, is that we now have board members who have specific sustainability experience in their background. Our board members are We are very much like a private company in terms of board governance with subcommittees, etc. And board members are recommended by the board, potential board members are recommended by the board to the government for approval. So it's more of a bottom-up, please approve, and they become board members. So we have specific ESG experience within that committee, as well as I have seen board members at ESG conferences on occasion, and that was when we could go to conference some time ago. But anyways, there is an increasing interest in the subject and willingness to educate. There are two other committees that are involved in ESG matters. Because we have linked compensation to climate change objectives, the compensation committee is now involved a bit at the compensation level, not so much the policy itself. And then as all our investments are reviewed with an ESG lens, and there are specific paragraphs in investment documents about ESG for the large investments, which are referred to the board for approval. Obviously, the committee that oversees investment and risk and approves these investments looks at ESG matters on a specific investment by investment basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertrand. My apologies for not calling on you there. I think we have two more questions in this area, although I would understand that the board would probably have a lot more as we come to a conclusion, but I'm trying to just get through the entire agenda, so apologies here for keeping us rolling. The next question goes back to Eva, and when we spoke with Eva, we came to the understanding that her board had recently had a discussion as to whether or not to have a sustainability committee of the board. And they did come to a conclusion. And so, Eva, if you could please describe for the CalSTRS Board Governance Committee that discussion and the conclusions that the board came to.
Yes, the reason that this discussion came up, it was in our latest board review. So it was not so long ago. And the reason was simply that everybody felt that this was one of the most important tasks for the board to work with. So just to add that we have 9 board members, as you know, and we have 3 committees already, risk, audit, and remuneration committee, like in many other companies. And the board decided, and I strongly support this, that sustainability is of so vital importance that it should be handled by the board as a whole from A to Z. It is something that concerns the board as a whole. It's very important that all board members can take part in all discussions to be able to, in the best possible way, learning from each other, bring forward different perspectives. And we are a small organization. AP2 consists of only about 70 people, and we have no sustainability department. The specialists that we have, they have been moved to our strategy department, just to underline that this is something from the beginning, from the core of what we do. And the board, I think, saw it in a similar way, that this is something that concerns us all. We shall be discussing it from the beginning to the end. And the preparations shall, of course, be done by us as an organization, but no extra discussions within parts of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. That's helpful, and I'm sure someone will have some questions for you again further on that, because it's very topical that many boards are actually talking about. Returning back to, and I'm going to refer to our panelists here as CDPQ and let them decide who answers what, so I don't end up with foot and mouth again. If we could just ask you, because you very well alluded to the fact that your CEO has a sustainability mandate, and Bertrand, you mentioned obviously the compensation committees involved as well, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But if you could speak to the CEO's mandate, please, and maybe just touch at a very high level on some of the remuneration issues, and we'll talk a little more about climate and remuneration further on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Good morning to all. It's a pleasure for me to be here. So it's quite interesting because we have a new CEO. He arrived a month before the pandemic. His timing was impeccable, and our board made sure to include a clear objective relating to ESG when they drafted our new CEO's mandate. So it's to safeguard CDPQ's leadership position in sustainable investment and its role as a key influencer on ESG matters. So that was quite clever quite a clever move from our board. And in terms of compensation, another very interesting aspect of our ESG strategy, and Bertrand was instrumental in putting all of this together in 2017, is that as part of our climate change strategy, we decided to tie all of our employees' the variable compensation to the achievement of climate change targets.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. And we'll certainly talk about that again. But I really like the idea of having the CEO of a mandate of being an influencer on ESG. That's very clever. Very clever on the part of the board. Well, thank you. We're tracking marginally ahead of schedule. We've made up a bit of time, so that'll leave plenty of time for questions. But we're going to get a little bit more into the meat of prioritizing and addressing sustainability issues and where some of our peer funds here focus their efforts. And so coming back to our CDPQ colleagues, can you please share with us what your priorities are around ESG and how the decision was made to prioritize on those focus areas?
Right, so we have 3 pillars of our strategy: climate change, governance, and diversity. Bertrand, maybe you could talk about climate change, and then I'll talk more about the 2 other pillars.
Yes, climate change is the policy itself is a standalone, and it has 4 pillars. The first one is to take climate change into consideration in all investment decisions. We have also established a budget to do more green investments with the target. That was, all these numbers are a bit outdated, but 80% increase in 3 years. We actually increased by 100%. So those are climate positive investments. We have also announced the target to reduce the footprint of our portfolio by 25% by 2025. Again, it was exceeded with -38. And to do a lot more engagement with corporates, with boards. And, you know, our involvement here is exactly that. We're talking to a number of plans on ESG, on sustainability, on climate, trying to help move the agenda. I think another thing where maybe that we should have said earlier in the previous question, Catherine, was the fact that ESG matters are reported to the board twice a year, and there is a specific presentation that is prepared that covers all the ESG activities that have been done, and statistics about proxy voting, where we stand on the climate targets and all that stuff is described, any issues that we face. And so we have a full discussion of these matters at the board twice a year. Catherine.
Thank you, Bertrand. So our 2 other pillars of our strategy, the diversity and governance. So for diversity, it's a more recent priority, and it's interesting because we realized quite early on in our reflection that we cannot be credible when we advocate for greater diversity within our portfolio companies and with our external managers if we don't foster really strong D&I practices internally within our own teams at CDPQ. So for diversity, we act both internally and externally. So internally, for instance, we review the promotion processes and criteria to really limit as much as possible the impact of unconscious biases. We've adopted a diversity and inclusion policy. We also reviewed last year our proxy voting guidelines, and we added specific targets. So we wish to have women represent at least 30% of the board of our portfolio companies by 2022. And if it's not the case, we could potentially vote against the chair of the governance or nominating committee. So it's quite impactful. And we plan to engage more and more on diversity with our portfolio companies. Governance now is a historical pillar for us because, of course, we've been exercising our voting rights at annual meeting of listed companies for quite some time. So we elect board of directors, we review executive compensation, we vote on various shareholder resolutions. This year, for instance, we publicly supported Say on Climate initiative. So this is a non-binding advisory vote on a company's strategy to, in terms of decarbonation of its portfolio. So we also engage a lot with boards and executives on ESG matters. Our governance strategy also includes some cybersecurity. We, of course, have experts working with us because we are not cybersecurity experts, but they pay close attention to a company's resilience to cybersecurity issues. Same goes for international taxation. So our experts analyze the tax practices of our portfolio companies to make sure they comply with our expectations. And if I can end maybe by mentioning that we're currently in the process, at the request of our CEO, we're reflecting on how we can be even more ambitious with our ESG sustainability strategy. And this, I think, is connected in some way to our renewed purpose. In French, we say raison d'être, to move from simply deploying capital to deploying constructive capital. So to invest with sustainability in mind for the long term, to build strong companies and strong communities. So when we've been reflecting on this for a few months now, and we realize that we're quite strong in our ESG defensive strategy, so we can easily incorporate ESG risks in our investment processes. But now what we really want to do is to enhance our offensive strategy when it comes to ESG, and to really empower our investment teams to reflect on how they can better use sustainability to create value for our depositors.
And maybe, Catherine, a word on the last part of your question as to how this came about. We are, as I colloquially refer to, a whale in a very small pond. CDPQ is the pool mechanism for all the public funds in the provinces, which is why we are so big for a province of 7 million people. As a result, we are in the public eye. And because we have 42 depositors who are institutions themselves, pension plans, etc., they indicate to us what they want to do, how they see the world, and that dialogue is ongoing. And Quebec is probably a little on the greener side of things in a North American context culturally. And so as a result, all this is coming to address a request from our clients, as well as a need to ensure that obviously portfolio performance over the long term. And I think there is increasing evidence that ESG is part of that dialogue.
Thank you both very much for that. That's very insightful, I think. Ava, perhaps we can ask you the same thing, what the priority areas are for AP2 and the process you use to identify them.
Yes, I hear that it's similar in many ways to what Bertrand and Catherine spoke about. We have decided to focus on 4 areas, and those are climate, diversity, human rights, and corporate governance. And actually setting them out, they first grew from our experience. The first initiative actually that the fund was taking in a more structured way was around diversity, because the fund has for the last, I think, 18 or 19 years produced something that we call the Women's Index, where we put together statistics about women in university education, women in certain areas, and then follow them around to leadership positions in private companies, and then to listed companies and to boards, just to provide the discussion that we've been having in Sweden around gender equality with some facts. And we have done that for 18 years. So the first initiative was around diversity, but the others have grown as time has gone. Human rights is the newest one. I think that has like 3 years. We've been doing that for 3 years. And when it comes to climate, we have, of course, worked a lot with that. We did our first carbon, CO2 footprint 12 years ago, I think. And we have recently adapted. First, can I go back to say that for climate, we see 3 actions. One is divestment, another one is dialogue, and the third is proactive investments. And we cannot move forward without having the 3 legs, because we need a lot of discussions out there, which I guess you do as well, on looking at this black or white. Either you have the companies or you don't, you divest them. We think we have a role that is all 3 parts. And just before Christmas this year, we adapted half of our portfolio to the Paris-aligned benchmark, which is something that the EU has brought forward, actually to index people delivering selling indexes. So it's not constructed for us, but it has a lot of interesting areas within it. So we have now adapted half of our portfolio to that one, and we are continuing doing that. When it comes to corporate governance, as our colleagues in Canada, we are active and at AGMs, and we are also, since we are domiciled in an area of the world where nomination committees is frequently used, when we get the question to be on a nomination committee, we do that, and we try to promote gender diversity and other parts of diversity there. And all over the world where we vote at AGMs, we always vote no if there are only men or only women in the board. So far, we haven't run into a board where there are only women, but I'm on the board of our real estate company here in Sweden, and there we are 7 women and 2 men. So we'll soon get there as well. And yeah, I think that's it for now.
Thank you, Eva. I just, for the benefit of our board and attendees, I just wanted to highlight that in Sweden, the nominations committees of corporations invite investors to participate in the nominations process, for those that aren't aware of that. And
yeah,
so
the largest owners.
Yes, which is a very unique aspect of Swedish corporate governance that, I sometimes wish we had in Canada. Anyhow, thank you very much, Eva. And on the subject of diversity and inclusion, and speaking of, putting their, how did you call it, Kathleen, constructive capital to work, you have a very good example of that at CDPQ. So could you please talk about the new fund in high level and explain what it is and where you hope to get with it?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So it's a $250 million fund that we launched last year, and it's targeting Canadian companies leveraging concrete D&I commitments to drive growth. So we are investing in SMEs, mostly committed to achieving in 5 years a representation of 25%, of at least 25% of people from diverse backgrounds. So women, visible minorities. within their board, their executive team, and their shareholder base. So $250 million is quite small. We're a big fund, but it's definitely a first step. And we're working on many other initiatives currently with, for instance, we're looking at how we can better incorporate diversity considerations when we evaluate our external managers. So definitely a lot happening in this space right now.
Yeah, thank you. We'll stay tuned for what it is that CDPQ does, because they're very, from my perspective anyway, very forward-thinking and innovative in the solutions that they find, as you'll see as we move through the rest of the conversation. So we focused a little bit on some of the investment areas. We're going to move now to more of an enterprise-wide or organizational response. And Bertrand and Catherine both told us a little bit about how their organization responded to societal issues such as the death of George Floyd. And I thought that was both Amy and I thought that'd be very interesting for you to hear, given that this is very prominent in US society as well as here. If I could please ask Jonathan to bring the slides back up again. There's a segment out of there, thank you, out of their stewardship report that talks a little bit about this. But in the interim, Catherine Bertrand, could you please respond?
Yes, of course. Well, I would say that the death of George Floyd, but also the pandemic, and its effects on economic and social inequality really accelerated the pace of our D&I initiatives. There's really a lot happening internally in terms of D&I, and the issue is really front and center for our executive committee. We did our best to support our teams. We joined many initiatives, the Black North Initiative, among others, aims to end the systemic barriers affecting the lives of Black Canadians. We were also one of the first signatories of the Canadian Investor Statement on D&I, led by the Responsible Investment Association. So as much as our focus in the past has been on governance and then climate change, diversity has definitely a lot of momentum. So one of our key priorities.
Thank you. Could you talk perhaps just a little bit about if you've made any other changes internally or no, or other than you supporting them with groups or what else there is there? If you could elaborate.
Well, we provided training to all of our investment teams and nominee directors on diversity for them to really be equipped when they are nominee directors on the boards of our portfolio companies. They can have the tools to advocate for greater diversity at the board, the executive level. So this was really also a key element of our strategy.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Catherine.
Catherine, another example which is telling. Just recently, we had an employee motivation survey internally, and there were, the results were looked at by senior management with a gender and diversity lens to see whether the opinions of people differed depending on those two criteria. Obviously it was very informative, and some thinking will be done to address issues that may have been identified.
Oh, well, we'll look forward to hearing more about that if and when you can speak about that. That sounds very interesting. Thank you very much, both of you. Jonathan, perhaps you could take that back down again. Perhaps I'm not doing this again. This is the last image. Coming back to Bertrand and Catherine to talk about addressing climate risk internally, and Catherine certainly alluded to this in her earlier comments, but if you could talk specifically about your approach to climate change and the process for integrating it into the compensation structures, that would be helpful. The investment process, some of the remuneration, to the extent that you can speak about it throughout the organization, that would be helpful.
Yes, so climate change is taken into consideration for all investment decisions. Sometimes it's simple, well, there is no issue. If you're an IT company in a place that uses renewable energy, there is little issue. Sometimes there are very big issues. We have also, so that's on a risk management. And obviously I spoke about our, what we call a green envelope, to try to seize investment opportunities that are climate aligned. And we announced in 2017 some targets with regards to CDPQ that I mentioned earlier. Internally, those targets are split by asset class. The information is not divulged, it's not public, but obviously the asset class know about it. And each asset class is given a carbon budget and targets on a reduction. And these targets are set with thinking about the levers that the asset classes have. Let me explain. Infrastructure, for example, invests a lot in power generation. And so that is green as well as gray or black. And so their portfolio and their ability to influence their targets is very, very different from, for example, real estate, which does green buildings, but has a much lesser footprint generally than these very intense industries. In liquid markets, obviously there's the liquidity and so the ability of buying, selling, which may not be available to private equity, for example. So all these things are considered and the targets are set collaboratively with the teams in questions so that in aggregate they match CDPQ's target. We appointed also some what we call carbon ambassadors within each asset class who are responsible for monitoring this and are our key contacts on climate change matters. And they understand exactly how the accounting for all this is being done. And so those are the privileged relationship we have, but we also talk to all the colleagues. From a remuneration point of view, CDPQ's remuneration takes on board individual performance, takes on board the fund's performance, as well as the team's performance. And in asset classes, the team's performance is really risk return adjusted. What we did was to apply a coefficient to both the team's performance, which depends on the team's respect or exceeding or not the climate change targets, as well as a coefficient on the fund performance with regards to the fund. So everybody at CDPQ is influenced. The accounting department, for example, will be only affected by the fund performance, whereas if you're in the infrastructure team, you're both impacted by the fund and your own team's performance with that. And these, so that's how it works. It is material and it's very important and it's lopsided. We have a little incentive to meet the targets, but really, and this is very important to understand, it's to us, to management, meeting targets is not a great achievement, something you have to do. And so, you know, a little plus when you meet the target and a very material negative if you don't. And there is very little, you know, usually when you set remuneration in the finance industry, it's prorated. Well, you are halfway to your return, so you're going to have half your bonus type of thing. For us, it's not that. It's either you meet the target or you don't. Halfway up the target is you have not met the target. And that has been super important to get everybody focused on the issue and managing this, educating themselves. It's taken very, very seriously.
Thank you, Bertrand. Can I just follow up with one slight question onto how you've done that? So you mentioned the accounting department being influenced, for example, by the climate targets as well. Does this extend to the entire organization? Anyone that has an incentive structure associated with the remuneration, are they also affected by the climate risk targets?
every single full-time employee of CDPQ, from assistants all the way to the CEO.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for expanding on that.
And this was, this was important also, and I should say, from a psychological and tone at the top thing. Climate is super important, and it applies to everybody. And the IT knows it's important, so we obviously had some IT developments to make sure that the carbon numbers and all that stuff is fed through our IT system. Well, they have an incentive to make sure it works, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, we're all working together to try to solve that issue. It's not just a matter for a bunch of people and the rest can ignore it. Very important.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Ava, turning to you. Now you've indicated you are a smaller organization. You have fewer staff than both CDPQ and CalSTRS. And yet you yourself have managed as a CEO, a longstanding successful CEO of AP2, to continue to foster sort of culture of curiosity and commitment around sustainability issues within your organization and among your employees. Can you talk a little bit about how you've managed to do that, please?
Yes, you using my favorite words about that commitment, culture, and curiosity. But let me start by saying that we have for a long time put a lot of work into constantly developing our culture and our values. We are very, very proud, all of us, of the mission that we have been given from the Swedish people, as we see as our fiduciaries. And I think this is something that also is reflected on how we work with sustainability, because we see this is absolutely important, vital part of us succeeding. And when I talk about commitment, culture, and curiosity, I mean commitment that all of us are working together, exactly like Bertrand said here. And the issues are driven both bottom up and top down. We talk about them at every management meeting, every board meeting, a lot of meetings with staff. Anyone can initiate a sustainability lunch that we often have with interesting people talking about things that we need to learn. And that's part of also about our culture, where good ideas can come from anywhere. And they have certainly done that over the years. So we're working with sustainability at all parts of our organization, not managed by us in the management team, but because people think this is important and find their own ways to do this. And also that we understand that we don't know everything ourselves. We need to learn a lot of new things, being able to take the most informed investment decisions. So we do that. We do that together. We do that with the board, the management, all our staff, sometimes together and sometimes in different meetings. So I think that is part of the reason.
Yeah, I think so. You certainly give people opportunity to explore where they have a passion and an interest, and I think that's important. I'm looking at the time here. We made up a little bit of time, and then we sort of fell back behind a little bit, but the conversation is very good. So inside of the last couple of minutes, so that we allow enough time for the board members and committee members to ask questions, let's try to be fairly succinct on the last section. And my apologies for not keeping us a little bit smoother here, but running along smoother. But at a very high level, we have 2 questions left for the benefit of the committee members around how our colleagues here are leveraging stakeholders on ESG. Now, Bertrand mentioned at the outset that a lot of the efforts of CDPQ are at the behest and request of their clients. And so we understand that CDPQ does some stakeholder and sentiment surveys. Can you perhaps, Bertrand, or Catherine, pardon me, speak a little bit about the role these play in respect of your sustainability practices and how your executive team might get involved with your stakeholders?
Bertrand, go ahead if you want.
Okay. we are very close to our clients. And so we have all sorts of meetings on all sorts of topics with them. Again, the organization at CDPQ is that we're a bulk fund manager, really. And the clients are paying pensions. They have the liability on their side. And so we have focus meetings with them on portfolio constructions, on risk measurement, on all sorts of issues, so that they understand what we do for them, the way we manage their money, and we hear what they want us to do, so that obviously the asset side, which we manage, is linked with the liability side. So that's the construct, and we have 42 depositors. And so ESG is no different. We well, actually next week, I believe, or the week after next, we are going to be in front of our clients talking about what we've done in ESG, the latest thinking, and there will be question and answer sessions. Some of our clients also are increasingly requested that we report to them on ESG matters in the same way that we would ask external fund managers to report to us, because they see us as an external fund manager. So it's interesting. Excuse me. More generally also, because we are public and we're a public fund and we're so prominent in the province, we also tend to excuse me, to have some confidential discussions with civil society to see what they think of what we're doing, etc., and get a temperature of the stakeholders, if you will.
Thank you, Bertrand. Eva, could I please ask you the same, and we'll close with you.
Yeah, I'll be brief. As I recently said, we see all Swedish citizens as our stakeholders, but they rarely interact with us, actually. We try to send out invitations to meetings, etc., but not many are interested in what we do. Of course, we meet with different NGOs frequently as they want to raise our awareness of specific topics, often after they have been through media. And when it comes to stakeholders, otherwise, every second or third year, we used to do a stakeholder analysis where we ask a lot of different stakeholders how they perceive our work and what they think is most important. But we are regulated through a specific law, and the government is evaluating us yearly. And it says in the law specifically that the means shall not be used for political purposes. So the law is really made to make it arm's length from the parliament. So we have not much interaction with stakeholders outside, except for NGOs.
Thank you, Eva. If it's okay, can I turn this back to Chair Hendricks to manage the question process?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Catherine. And thank you so much to our panel. I've been furiously taking notes, lots of quotes, quotable quotes, and just really appreciate the conversation. I'd love to open it up to questions from board members. I certainly think there's a lot of food for thought, some common themes that we've experienced, but also I think a lot of questions moving forward of kind of how do we want to move forward as a board at CalSTRS. So board committee members, I welcome your questions, and I see one from Bill. Bill?
Thank you very much. What a great presentation by all the participants. And I want to thank the chair and Amy and her staff for putting all of this together. When I hear the comments by the participants on this panel, it makes me a little concerned, because I'm here in the United States, and what you're doing in Sweden and Canada is so much more progressive in so many ways, and there's so much for us to learn. As an individual, I am very concerned about global climate change, and also as a fiduciary and as an individual, I'm very concerned about sustainable investing. And I acknowledge how important it is for major pension funds and other large asset managers to have an impact on policies with regard to global climate change and other ESG issues. But I must say that you know, there is this real concern as a fiduciary, not concern as much as I understand that we have to, when we set a target, for example, we have to have the appropriate evidence to support that target set. We can't, I mean, I, as an individual, you know, would like to have, you know, a very early zero tolerance target, but I need the evidence upon which to base that. And so because of your experience, what did you use to develop the rationale for setting targets in your organizations? I mean, what evidence did you gather? Because that's something that I think we have to look to if we are going to step up and start setting targets. Could you help us on that?
Yes, that's a very, very important question. When we started, and I'll be very candid with you, that was in 2017, and you know, science, anything was still in its infancy. So it was more an aspirational thing, saying climate change is very serious and we need to define a strategy and define what we're going to do about it. And so we studied the portfolio and soon realized that the emissions therein are highly concentrated, and I'm sure it's the same for yours. It's very common, and started thinking, okay, could we tweak things? Could we look at things better? And also with regards to our green investing, obviously there are new opportunities that occur. And so let's pursue those. And so it was, we didn't look that much at, you know, except for green investments, but on the reduction of the carbon footprint, we felt that we could start working on that. It is also somewhat linked to risk. There are increasing risks, and I'll give a few examples. And therefore we thought, okay, let's start, and then we'll see where that goes. And, you know, when we became a member of Net Zero in 2019, the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, we are now in the process of thinking about setting targets, new targets, net zero aligned. And there is two things. There is pressure to reduce, and then there is the need to invest in the real economy, which could be somewhat contradictory. You know, and I would say you hear a lot in finance and in political circles that one needs to invest in wind farms and not invest in coal, cement, copper, and plastics, because those are evil. Well, sorry, but a wind turbine is made of those ingredients that I just mentioned. And so we are just in the process, having been at it now for 4 years, of being, so to speak, a lot smarter about our strategy and really trying to find a way to combine both, to combine both the need to seize the opportunities, mitigate the risks, and invest in decarbonizing the real economy at the same time. And I think that came with the benefit of hindsight, obviously, and I would encourage you and all those who are you know, starting or advanced, but to really make that reflection and look at, you know, how can we direct investments? Where are the investment opportunities going forward? There are some in green, but there are also some, given the $1 trillion that will have to be invested in all these sectors that are highly intense, that will need to be decarbonized. There are huge investment opportunities. So we're looking at it with a proactive sort of, where can we, and we're long-term investors, where are the opportunities for us to invest in the long term and position the fund. There is also a very important risk angle. And I'll always use an example that because I understand, and in the US in particular, there's a question about fiduciary responsibility and whether climate has anything to do with fiduciary responsibility. We've solved that question with a resounding yes. And I think, and in California, you're well placed to know about the damage that wildfires have done to PG&E. There is an example in EFT in 2019, there was an article saying that the car industry in Europe will be subject to 30 billion euros worth of fines by 2022 if they haven't improved the efficiency of their vehicle fleet, the vehicles that they sell. 3 years, 30 billion euro. And to us, that's risk. To us, one needs to understand this. It doesn't mean that one must shy away from the car industry, but it's a realization that you need to take this on board and think which one is the better position if you want to be invested in that sector. And there, I can go on and on and on about the type of risks that we see. There is also risks. It's important to understand because there are risks that may be over the long term, which are not so present today. And depending on your investment horizon, depending in the asset class that you invest, you need to understand these things. And the point is here that having targets, having the pressure that we put on the organizations through the incentive remuneration, etc., focuses the mind of people, forces education, forces, it's like, this is important, and we're going to need to hear from the investment people, our colleagues. If they say there is no risk, please explain why, as opposed to, just ignore the whole subject and we're fine. And in some cases, there is no risk. So it's really, really a question of culture. And then once people understand, once senior management understands, then you can address the complicated question that you ask about where are the returns and where is the fund best positioned. An issue with climate is that, and I understand where you sit from a fiduciary responsibility point of view, but the problem is there is no history. And the future is not the past, and there is no data in the past. So making those determinations and saying, well, it's always been like that, so I orient the fund like that, is not possible in this case. And that must be taken into account.
I have a ton of follow-up questions out of deference to my fellow committee members. I defer there and would hope that we can follow up at some point in time. Thank you very much for your presentation.
I don't see other questions right now. So Bill, if you do want to ask a follow-up question right now, I would welcome it. Bill, by the way, does live in San Francisco, which is like the bastion of activism around climate change, I would say. So I think he has a pretty knowledgeable place to be coming from. Did you want to follow up, Bill?
Aspirationally, I'm there. I mean, but again, as a fiduciary, there are certain standards to which we're held and statutory standards here in California, as trustees of CalSTRS. So we have to be more than aspirational. We have to show a basis upon which we make some of these decisions, factual basis. And so, that there lies the rub. And that's why I asked the question. But, more granular, when you make investments, your asset managers are making investments. What criteria do you use to measure the consideration of sustainability? Is it TCFD, or what do you use to measure, or do you use any particular guideline?
Eva, do you want to tackle that, or?
Sure. It certainly depends on what kind of investments there is. I mean, we are a fundamental manager. We have a large quant. We have a lot of unlisted assets. So let me take private equity as an example where we have put forward questionnaire that we always use when assessing their work with sustainability. And we do that, we're using the PRI template as a start, but we have developed this ourselves. And the reason that we do this is a constant dialogue with our private equity managers. But one thing that we have found very useful is that when we put together this questionnaire, etc., and we show the results to our largest private equity firms with no names, but we show them that, look here, there are 15 peers to you that are scoring, are doing a lot more than you are doing. That's one way. It may sound extremely simple, but it really makes them work on these issues. But we are a great supporter of the TCFD. We try to engage in different initiatives, but I think the whole of the industry is struggling right now with how do we measure the impact of our investments. We have been coming back to the previous question to Bertrand. We are encouraging. I think it's better to start doing what you can in different parts of your portfolio than to sit and wait for your wonderful strategist to come out with a plan for all of your holdings. You can find research in certain areas and you can apply them, even if it's not to the whole of your portfolio. I mean, we are working in so many different parts of our portfolio. It could be bonds or private equity or sustainable infrastructure, but also when we are doing our asset liability modeling, trying to model climate change and how this will affect our future portfolio in 30 years' time. So I would say just start by doing something. It's better than waiting for some wonderful person to say, this is it.
Perfect is the enemy of the good, right, Eva?
Yes.
Just get started.
Yeah. My strong belief.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Eva.
Thanks, Bill. I see Keith, and then I think after Keith, if there are no other questions, I might I might let Betty have a final word, and then I can wrap things up. So, Keith.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the insights that you're sharing. I'm taking some of the things that you've touched on, the panelists have touched on, and especially like the concept of investing in a real world while you have these aspirational goals, and the practical aspects. I was trying to see whether or not what are the limits that you've come up against, and specifically not necessarily in environmental climate change, but I'm thinking in terms of let's look at the S part of the ESG and the social aspects. And in fact, when you're talking about a 30 or 40-year investment horizon, obviously what goes on in society, the social aspects, unrest versus an uncertainty or changes in there. Thinking about the effects of COVID on, for example, at least in the United States, California, is what are termed essential workers, people who are in many of the service industries, some of whom lost their jobs because they were in like the hotel, hospitality industry, versus people who were working in supermarkets, grocery stores, and things like that. People who had to go to work in order for society to continue to run, and yet others that were able to work from home and protect, and perhaps get a little bit more protection. You have the potential for, at least the growing, and in the United States, the growing divide between what might be termed as the working classes or versus the professional managerial classes who are able to were able to get through the pandemic, but yet, and also the economic benefits, at least in the United States, somewhat were a little bit skewed even from the assistance, and some of that is related to the structure of our economy. What are the limits? Thinking about Sweden and a focus on human rights, which may be somewhat analogous to this concept. How far can you go? What can you do? Do we need to study? I mean, is study at least part of it to look at and analyze, as opposed to just saying, well, that's too big? I'd appreciate your thoughts.
This is if we talk about climate as a tricky question, when it comes to human rights, it's so much harder in the way that you just explained, because the effects are social unrest, etc. We have started out trying to learn more about these issues, and also thinking of, within that concept for us, we think about the countries that we invest in and try to predict or see what will be happening what is happening in those countries right now, and how can we act as an investor in those countries, and how can we, especially where there is unrest and you have breakage of human rights, should we just leave or should we try to do something? And we have said we can't do, we are a small organization, we have to pick certain areas where we want to engage, and we do that through our embassy, through our different networks. Within that area, I think the CalSTRs of this world, the really large funds, we have been teaming together in a lot of different areas, and we see that we can affect the societies, but we need to have a common understanding of what we want to achieve. We are sitting on a lot of capital, but that doesn't make us the smartest persons to rule the world. I think we could benefit pension funds like us by working a lot more together with what you call them, development banks. We have a very positive experience, because if we want to get into like frontier markets and really affect change, I think we must pool our different competencies and what our experiences are. And I think we could accomplish a lot more by working together, but it's so hard to make it happen. I'm on a committee within the Swedish government at this point, and we keep talking about this as well. How do we pool the resources from different parts of the society to make us go into the future? That was not a very good answer, because there is no good answer, but I gave it my best.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Keith, because I think that S and ESG, I mean, just talking to different funds around the world, Eva, it's a constant struggle because of how do you measure it? And there's different issues happening in different places. So I appreciate you raising it, Keith, and we'll kind of partner together, Eva, and the Canadians and others to try and solve this. I do see Harry's hand, so I just want to make sure I get to Mr. Chair of the board, and then we'll go from there. Harry, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the committee leadership and representatives from Mosaic, and of course the panelists for being with us today. Beautiful power of technology, Europe, Canada, California, all represented right here. Very great conversation. The transition to a lower carbon future obviously is front and center for all of us, and there's a lot of common agreement. How do you, any one of the panelists, how do you and the teams you work with think about that issue from the framing of it as a just transition in relationship to the impact that the transition will have on the workforce and current workers and future workers? And to what extent do executives and companies in these large industries, how can they be part of making sure the transition is just?
Maybe I'll take that one. Very important question, particularly in the hydrocarbon extractive industries, largely, because for the rest, they will need to adapt, but it's adaptation rather than we really have a wall up in front of the on the road. Also an issue if you're operating coal-fired power stations, for example. Just a few pointers on that, with regards to, we have invested in a business in Indiana that generates power. We are reducing we're demolishing the coal-fired power plants. This was part of the investment thesis, replacing them by gas. And these businesses obviously make sure that the workers are retrained, et cetera, and operate the new plants as opposed to laying them off. And if you can't, we're making sure that they are compensated fairly and retrained for taking new jobs. I think also, and this is very, very important, is in some cases, it's going to be very difficult, especially oil, coal mines, etc. But the point is, not my view, and this is my view personally, it is better to address the issue today by the companies that we have in portfolio gradually, rather than pretend that this is not an issue and let these companies collapse in a major fireball later on and have thousands of people laid off from 1 minute to the next, which is why it is so important to have that dialogue today with the corporates and say, okay, what are you going to do about this? And, I say that with personal experience. I've been growing up in France and with the steel and coal industry in Europe, all based at the border between Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and Germany. And the governments there were like holding these industries at arm's length, until it became not possible. And 2 or 3 million people got unemployed from 1 minute to the next. And it was a wasteland. So it's really, really important to have these conversations and influence companies to actually do the right thing. And coming back to the previous question on social, it's the same. If we are shareholder of a company, industrial company in Europe, and we notice that their health and safety track record was not satisfactory, very uneven across their plants. And as a major shareholder of that company, we just said to management, okay, what's up with that? You need to fix this. It might cost money, but you need to fix this. And this is the role of investors. Same, if we're involved in businesses in emerging markets or elsewhere, even on our side of the pond, where workers are underpaid or mistreated. And this is something that we try to influence. We measure this. And we try to influence management to take the right action so that it is fair.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I completely agree with your comments. The only slight area of potentially disagreement would be, I think, as investors in these companies for the long haul, as we engage with these companies about the transition and the just transition, it's not simply what are they going to do about the transition for their workforce. I think we have a responsibility, speaking for myself, not for our board at this point, but we have a responsibility as investors to say, how can we help you in that transition? It's our mutual responsibility. And we probably agree. It's probably just semantics.
Thanks, Harry. I'm gonna just a couple comments. I'll hand it over to Betty, and then but I, again, extend my thanks to everyone for the conversation. Lots to think about. I think one of the key words that comes out for me, besides I love Ava's commitment, culture, and curiosity. I'm gonna borrow that. But it's like integration. And I think our board has been looking at ESG since I think the 70s. We added an investment belief on ESG and sustainability. We've done a lot of the work, and I think Bill's question is really appropriate. We've been doing a lot of the work. We've had a lot of experts come in and talk to us about where we're headed. I've been on this board almost 10 years, and Harry and I were lucky enough to head over to London and the Netherlands. I think my first or second year on the board with Jack and Chris, our CIO and CEO, to basically talk to different funds and their sustainability houses and how far we've come from there. I mean, that feels like the world has changed. The fact that we're talking about ESG is integral to who we are as investors versus 9 or 10 years ago. And I know the US were always a little behind or a bit behind Europe and Australia and others. But it's really exciting to see the work. But I think one of the questions we've had as a board is on the governance side, because that's where we're at today on the committee, is, do we have a separate sustainability committee? How do we oversee the CIS portfolio is growing, the staff is growing. How does the board manage that? And I think, and hearing this conversation, this is just, my own opinion. And so certainly the board will have to have further conversations, but it really feels, and I see the tendency in boards, when you want to focus on something, you do create a committee or you create a special focus on it, which makes sense in a lot of areas. But given the level of, the 40 some years that we've been doing this work, but right now I really see this as a critical time where kind of that integration of who we are as an organization, both on the CEO and kind of enterprise side, and then on the investment side, really having that come together. We have Jack leaving us and going on to retirement and other things, and having a new CEO coming in. It just seems like sustainability being kind of integrated into all of who we are. I like the ideas of the training, the DEI training for our investment staff, for our staff, for our board, perhaps. I think that's a great idea. But that integration and having it be kind of a holistic approach seems really important moving forward, so we can all carry those values. So I look forward to talking more as a committee about that. We're handing the reins over to Bill and Jennifer Erden in terms of the leadership of the committee for next year. So Betty and I are going to be doing some other work. So Bill, we'll leave it in your capable hands, and Jennifer, to continue these conversations. But I'll hand it over to Betty for any final comments, and then we'll close out this item.
Great. Thank you, Sharon, very much. And thank you to Amy and to Catherine Jackson for pulling this really wonderful panel together. And to our panelists, I just really appreciate the forthrightness and the, just the, the honesty with how tough navigating all of this is. And I think if there are any lessons to be taken away, it is that I think every investor has its set of challenges that some we share in common, some are unique to our respective jurisdictions and operational rules. But on the one hand, it was affirming to know that we're getting it right with respect to the ongoing engagement with companies. That we're not going to move until investors and companies are actually in sync about how we move forward together. And also, I think we're also getting it right in that all of these partnerships and collaborations that each of the investor institutions are a part of, whether it be Climate Action 100+, certainly our work through Ceres, PRI, all of that just continues to add value in terms of the more information we have and can share that, this is an exact body of work that we're all undertaking. So I think that's all very helpful. But it takes me back to the whole focus of fiduciary duty. And I think about our duty of loyalty. And how, at the end of the day, it is about our focus on how we deliver for our beneficiaries. And what I really appreciated about the presentation today was just, Ava, especially you, and certainly to our friends at CDPQ, about just how hard this has been. Just how hard has this been? We don't have all the answers. But I think as fiduciaries, it's okay to just talk about in that way, that if we can be honest and really act in good faith with respect to how we're going to resolve these challenges when there are conflicts that come up, how we can look at those conflicts impartially, to Harry's question about just transition, engaging in that so that we really come to a common understanding about what the set of issues are that we're going to have to embark upon. I mean, I think that is really the work that's ahead of us. And I'm just happy to know that we have such terrific global partners to do this work with. So thank you very much to Ava, Bertrand, and Catherine for joining us today. And Sharon, thank you for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much again. I feel like it's great to start the morning with this kind of intellectual kind of stimulation and lots of food for thought, and appreciate your input. And we will definitely be circling back around with Amy and team to think about how to integrate some of the issues that you've raised for us back into our practices as a board. So thank you so much, and have a safe and healthy rest of your Friday. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll say goodbye to our panel.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Eva. See you at the next meeting. Great. Thank you so much. And thanks. Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate you, getting those speakers and Catherine's partnership. And I noticed Catherine's working with Mosaic now. So you're a smart recruiter, Amy. I see how that works. So really well done. And thank you for the conversation. I think it's always good for us to get that global perspective and just kind of hear where other funds are at from other places. So did you have any final comments, Amy? I should have looked to you if you had any other thoughts before we go on to item 4.
No, I don't. I really enjoyed the conversation this morning, the questions, all the themes that came up. I agree. This is a difficult space. It's an emerging space, and one that we all have to very much work together to stay focused on and committed to as we work to get this right. So I appreciate the committee's time and interest in this subject, and this won't be the last time. So thank you again.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming you took notes on the comp issue, CEO, CIO evaluation, ways incentive for staff in terms of sustainability. There were a couple of notes that we'll make sure we follow up on. So thanks, Amy. So item 4, and I'll look to you, Bill, because you're going to be taking the reins starting July 1st. So this is the proposed, item 4 is our proposed meeting work plan. And what I would propose is an information item, but obviously between now and the next meeting, which is in November, I assume, Bill, you, Jennifer, and Amy and team will meet together to tweak this. This is kind of the general outline. There's some standing items that are typically in our board governance work plan for the year. Anything you want to speak to, Amy?
Well, I think there are, and I would invite Brian as well, because I know he was the primary architect of a number of the items that you see on the page in front of you. In particular, just being sensitive to continuing to explore the operations of your board meetings. How does the format look? What kind of flexibility makes you most effective as a board? And how do you go about actually accomplishing that within your regulatory scheme? So we have that for sure. The look at your CEO delegations, of course, is a perennial topic that you typically have as a matter of good governance to monitor and gauge, are they still right? So that's certainly on the topic for November. And then, of course, we have the continuance of the Board Education Forum, and we'll try to plan that thoughtfully based on the needs of the committee and the outgrowth of your conversation. So I'm certainly looking forward to working with Bill and Jennifer and Brian and Jill as we move forward into this next fiscal year. We always try to deliver in a meaningful way on your governance issues to keep you moving forward as a group. But Madam Chair, that's all I'd say for right now.
Thanks, Amy. I see Gail's hand, and then I'll come to you, Bill, right after that. Gail, any questions?
I do, just one brief one, and thank you for that, and for the panel as well. Just to build on Amy's comments, I would love to perhaps consider the cadence of meetings and the materials for those meetings, just to kind of create an efficient sort of pre-read system and meeting system, and just consider maybe not meeting monthly. I know we used to be every other month, just sort of how we can get work done efficiently with kind of a pre-read system. So as we just work on that, I would love to be a part of that conversation. And I completely agree with everything Amy just said, and would really appreciate being able to work kind of on some of those efficiencies and even some of the delivery of the board materials, so that there's kind of a pre-read expectation and then a presentation expectation that could even be separate. I've just been giving that a lot of thought since that compensation conversation, and just that personal learning moment as well. So.
No, and Gail, you're raising, I will just say it's a perennial issue since I've been on the board, not to say that we haven't made improvements, but I will tell you, and I think that feedback is always welcome. as the leaders of the board, Harry and I always welcome that feedback and the questionnaires after every meeting. And then Amy and Harry and I go over that. But certainly always open to constructive feedback to make meetings more effective and efficient. I think the pre-reads, I certainly think with Zoom, I know I get a lot of emails. It's hard to manage that. And so I think that's helpful feedback and completely receive that and want to get better. We're lifelong learners, so we want to get better every meeting. So thank you for that feedback, Gail. And I'll make sure, obviously Bill's here, so he's hearing that, and we'll make sure he integrates those comments. It's all up to you, Bill, next year to fix it all, make all the meetings
I had
efficient.
Gail on mute. I'm sorry. What did she say? No,
Are there any feedback you want, Bill?
I can say that anything good that comes out of this committee for the next year will be because of Jennifer and in part me. And anything that you don't like is going to be Brian's responsibility.
Perfect. You've learned already.
And so anyway, I'm honored to serve as the chair of this committee. It's a very important committee, I know. And I look forward to the guidance of Amy and Brian, who've done a superb job in the past, and now they've got to rope me in, and Jennifer is going to add to their team of keeping me within the sort of limits. And so I look forward to the next year, and I hope we get a lot of things good done. Thank you.
Great. Perfect. Thank you, Bill. So on to item 5, which I didn't hear any information requests except for Gail's input around the board efficiency input, right, Braden? Nothing else?
No, ma'am, I didn't hear any. There weren't any requests for information.
Okay, thank you. And then item 6 is the draft agenda for the next committee meeting, which obviously is just a draft. And there's time between, I can't believe it's June right now. It's June 10th today. Where did the time go? But this is for the November meeting. So there'll be ample time between now and then for Bill, Jennifer, Amy, Brian, and others to tweak this agenda as needed. I think the standard practice is to put standing items in the draft agenda and certainly additions. So if you want to be thinking about board education items, really excited to hear what you guys come up with. So, Harry?
When you're finished, Sharon, I just want to make a brief comment.
I'm finished.
Okay, I just want to take a moment, 60 seconds. The end of our fiscal year is June 30th. We begin our new year July 1st. And this has been an extraordinary year for all of us. And I want to thank each and every one of you. It's been a pleasure working with you through this experience. I think we've all learned a lot. We've moved to Zoom, meetings on Zooms. We've tweaked things. We've made some changes along the way. And I think an objective observer could step back and say, we've managed it as well as we possibly can. And I've gotten to know some of you more than others, and we all manage a lot in our lives, in our personal lives, in our professional lives. And as the chair of the board, I want to thank you for your continued commitment and dedication to the service and mission of our membership. So thanks very much. I look forward to working with all of you in the year ahead.
And I want to congratulate you, Harry, on the graduation of your daughter this afternoon, or this morning.
Melissa,
Congratulations.
Nice stages.
Congratulations. That's great.
Yeah.
We're bringing tissue. She's a very resilient young woman, and that's what we're most proud of. She's been through a lot at a very young age. So we're proud of her. And thanks, Bill. Thanks so much. I'm bringing the tissues.
Great, thank you. We do have one final item, which is an opportunity for statements from the public. Samantha, are there any members of the public that want to speak about this?
There are no members of the public in Zoom.
Great. And then with that, I will just say, ditto what Harry said. It's been, I don't know about you guys, it's been a 15 months. It's been a ride, and I'm hoping we're, coming out of it. I can't wait to be together again. So with that, we can adjourn the Board Governance Committee. And Karen, for Benefits and Services, when would you like to start?
About 15 minutes.
Okay, so that would be 10:50, what time is it? 10:55?
Sure.
Karen? Okay. So 10:55, we're on for benefits and services.
All right. And all hands on deck.
All hands on deck. We'll be there. It's a committee of the whole, so we'll all be there. Thanks, Karen.
Right. See you in a little bit.
See you in
Thanks a
little
lot,
bit.
Sharon.
Okay, no problem. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is the Benefits and Services Committee for June 2021. If we can go ahead, I call the meeting to order, and can we do the roll call, please, Sadia?
Sure. Good morning. Ms. Bradford? Here. Ms. Hendricks?
Here.
Ms. Higa?
Here.
Mr. Keeley? I don't believe I see him. Mr. Prezant?
Here.
Ms. Erden?
Here.
Good morning. For the Director of Finance, Ms. Whitaker?
Here.
For the State Treasurer, we have Mr. Rufino.
Here.
For the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mr. Yamanaka.
Here.
For the State Controller, Ms. Paquin.
Here.
Chairperson Yamamoto, you have quorum.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to have a few notes to speak for the audience. The board will have a 10-minute public comment period at the end of each agenda item. Public comment after each item will be limited to the agenda topic. There will be an additional opportunity for statements from the public for items not pertaining to a specific agenda item at the end of the open session meeting. Individuals wishing to speak at the board web conference should dial into the public comment line, which is 833-986-0555, and wait in the call-in queue. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes for their presentation. And if there's not enough time for speakers to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. Teachers' requirement board meetings are live web streamed and video archived, which are available to the public on the calstrs.com website. To protect the privacy of minors who wish to address the board, public commenters under the age of 18 only state their name and affiliate organization, but do not share any personal identifying information such as last name, age, or school. Let's see. So with that, we'll go on to item number 1. And we have a very short meeting today, so hopefully we can get through our business at hand. Okay, so thank you, everyone. So item number 1, approval of the agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, have approval. Moved by Sharon, seconded by Denise. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, item is approved. Now we'll go on to the consent agenda item number 2, approval of the minutes of the November 6th, 2020. That was a long time ago. Benefits and Services Committee. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Denise, seconded by Sharon. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, measures approved. Okay, that leads us to number 3. The impacts, item number 3 is the impacts of pension solution activities on service levels. This is, we're going to allow 30 minutes for this. And it's been a rough year. Everybody has commented on it. Everybody has had challenges. A lot of staff has, as Harry said, personal and professional challenges that we've had to go through. And it applies also to our staff and all the remote work that has been done, all the challenges that it's been given to the different teams of CalSTRS. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about all those impacts that the pension solution in particular has done and has made demands on our staff. So take it away, Bill.
Morning, everyone. Good morning, Madam Chair.
as I launch into this, I just wanted to preface it by saying that originally when we were looking at this board item, we were going to be looking at the impacts of pension solution as it relates to implementation. But given some of the more recent developments and potential extension of the timeline, we thought it would be more appropriate to focus on how the implementation process relates to current member service levels. So we could move on to the next slide. Now, currently we have engagement from all 5 divisions within benefits and services. There are 478 staff across the 5 divisions. To lend some perspective, one of the components that always plays into resource constraints is potential vacancies across each of the divisions. So for instance, currently we have 26 vacancies across the branch, and we do strive to maintain as low of a vacancy level as possible. But those vacancy levels do play into salary savings, during which time the positions are vacant. And we leverage those to offset the costs of things such as blanket positions that are leveraged for the project. So I'll go into that a little bit later. Currently, the largest 2 divisions are customer service, which has 119 staff, followed by retirement readiness with 118. And then the third largest is DASB, 92 staff. If you'll recall in the overview of this particular item, DASB is the one really that has stood out owed to the 2 complex areas that it focuses on in terms of ongoing challenges to ensure that they're meeting the demands of the project while also handling the operational workloads of day-to-day work. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. And here you see where the various components are that require resources from our staff for the project. We're currently at functional rollout 2. The components involved in functional rollout 2 and 3 are very similar. They involve test case writing, the large components of it, the collecting of data required to test each of the items, and then the execution of those test cases. So as a measure of comparison, thus far, relative to our test case processing, we have created 2,900 problem incident reports, of which 1,800 have been closed. And that's a vital component to ensuring that we have a sound system. Of the components, the user acceptance testing bears the largest burden in terms of our balancing workloads, while also ensuring that the project needs are met. The distribution of where we're at right now, and this was mentioned a little bit earlier in the broader item related to pension solution, we're roughly at about the 2/3 mark. So functional rollout 1 comprised at a high level about 20% of the timeline, functional rollout 2 about 60%, and then functional rollout 3 an additional 20%. So gives you an idea of where we're at right now. And as I mentioned, user acceptance testing being the one with the highest demands. If we go to the next slide, you'll see the incremental increase in terms of our subject matter expertise requirements toward the project. So from 2018-19 through present, we've gone from about 18.6 full-time equivalents to close to 40 full-time equivalents. And if we move to the next slide, and this was referenced in the board item write-up as well, you'll see that one clearly stands out as having had the most complex requirements and thereby the greatest contributions towards supporting the project. For DASB, about 2,500 hours is the current average. That has trended down as we anticipate a rescheduled timeline for project completion, but it is expected to ramp back up again. And following in second in terms of constraints is service retirement with about 1,700 hours. We move to the next slide. This is one of multiple areas that we thought to leverage in terms of addressing what we knew to be some significant constraints as we moved through the project. The repurposing of some of our staff has left the need for some basic operational functions and then more complex ones, which do require being addressed by permanent staff. So for purposes of some of the more basic operational needs, we have added an additional 10 student assistants out of the total of 23 that Disability and Survivor Benefits has utilized, and then 6 additional resources out of 10 for service retirement. In addition to that, we have also added 4 student assistants to employer services, one of which is in the process of being backfilled. That's one element of several that I'll refer to a little bit later during this overview. We move to the next slide. When you look at the 2 key areas, really, with regard to customer service, employer services, and retirement readiness, we don't have any significant impacts. Our focus has been primarily to ensure that DASB and service retirement are able to reprioritize workloads as needed and or look at additional resources in terms of blanket positions to help support the project and the operational workloads. So case in point, about 23 FTEs, which represents about a quarter of DASB's overall workforce, has been redirected to support the project activities. And in terms of impacts, we're seeing about a 17-day delay in disability application processing and an equivalent 17 days in survivor benefit average processing time. Next slide. So aside from the obvious, which is looking at the workloads, there's also some oversight and risk mitigation in terms of how we balance and reprioritize workloads while being mindful of the potential impacts to other strategic initiatives that we have aside from the project. So that remains an area that we try to balance as best as possible. In some cases, deferring some less critical components. And one of the areas within disability and survivor benefit that has definitely been also impacted as a result of the pandemic is the increase in the caseload monthly average, which has gone up approximately 76% from 2,100 caseload work types in the 2019-2020 fiscal year to about 3,700 in the current fiscal year. Next slide. So here you see a sort of a breakdown of some of the different operational risks that we face. And with regard to workload trends, as I had mentioned a little earlier, we're looking to, where possible, ensure that the support teams within each of the divisions, every division has an operational side and a support side, is leveraged primarily for addressing project needs, but there are instances where we do need to leverage the operational staff as well. For purposes of ensuring that certain critical functions are met, we're looking at redeploying resources and sort of using a resource sharing, if you will. One good example of that we've incorporated is taking and moving some of the inquiries relative to basic questions for survivor benefit and DASB overall to the customer service division, so as to provide more bandwidth within DASB for processing. Another area that we focus on is ensuring that we are trying to maintain a high level of morale and also concentrating on what our overall attrition is that we might see related to impacts of higher workloads. One of those being the overtime component that staff is putting in to ensure the workloads are getting done. So as an example of that, in the last fiscal year, we have had 4 attritions within disability and survivor benefit. And while in any given year, we will have staff attrit out, obviously the bigger concern is that the ability to ramp someone up to the level of bench strength in terms of knowledge takes months in most cases and in some instances, more than a year. So attrition at this point in the project is also something that can have a significant impact. Staff burnout, the obvious, we're looking at how much overtime is being worked, knowing that in any given year we do incorporate overtime as needed, but we're trying to be very mindful of not leveraging that as the primary lever that we pull for mitigation of backlogs in the workloads. And then, of course, there's the leadership component as well. As my director for the Disability and Survivor Benefit has stated, there are ample times when she has seen the leadership team in Disability and Survivor Benefit working way after what one would deem to be normal hours, and they're still on, ensuring that they aren't the weak link in the chain that moves the process of workload completion forward. Next slide. And so finally, when we look at this in terms of its totality, we know that we're going to be in the process of completing the user acceptance testing for functional rollout 2, followed by pretty much the same work stream for FR3, but potentially without the same high level of resource demands. The extended timeline that we will likely see at some point in the July timeframe, once there's greater clarity around that, will also mean that we'll most likely have a bit more time to spread out the tasks that need to be completed for functional rollout 2. But we're not being completely reliant on that alone as a measure to be able to address some of these constraints. So going into the project, I will say that there was an anticipation that we would have some level of constraint in terms of staffing to be able to do both project-based needs and operational workload. So at the beginning of this endeavor, we leveraged 25 blanket positions for backfill purposes of staff that would be contributing toward the project. And those 25 are actually duplicated on the technology services side as well. So we have 25 positions there, blanket positions, many of whom came from benefits and services. And this starting as far back as 4 to 6 years ago. And then 25 additionally that were brought into play to help support the benefits and services side. They work in conjunction with one another. Aside from that, as we have looked at the analysis of increasing caseloads, particularly with regard to DASB, we have looked at other mitigation measures, which includes the addition of blanket positions for those 2 highest risk area currently, which is service retirement and DASB. That concludes the formal overview of the presentation. With that, I will open it up to questions that you might have. And I also have members, the directors of the Benefits and Services Division, in case there are any specific questions you might have about one of those areas.
Great. Thank you, Bill. I see Sharon's hand raised.
Thank you, Bill, for this. And I have to say, when I reread the title of this item, and it says impacts of pension solution activities on service levels, although I, as a board member, I care deeply about service levels. I think I'm, reading the materials, we're only as good as, our people. And so I think that sort of, obviously, I have a concern about service levels, but my primary concern is really about our people and how they're functioning and how they're being supported to be able to kind of, work at the highest level. And I know, just talking more with service disability, that's just sitting on appeals, hearing these stories for me is hard enough. I can't imagine, serving our members that are going through so many challenging experiences every day. And so I wondered if you could just, I guess, to ease my mind in reading this report and then looking at the mitigation efforts at the end, can you share maybe just a little more color around, because there was kind of just a quick paragraph at the end, a few comments about, feeling supported, celebrated, and valued. And I guess I just want to say out loud in this meeting, that is not an afterthought in my mind, or that's not just a finishing paragraph. To me, it's what makes us who we are. And so I wondered if you could talk, and if anyone else from the team wants to chime in, about how I've been thinking a lot about mental health and thinking a lot about how do you sort of operate at the highest level when you're managing a lot of stress and challenges. So on top of trying to do your work, doing it, during COVID, and then doing that on top of pension solution and some of the challenges that's presenting. So I wonder if you could just talk to us a little more about how, as leadership and as executives, we're, I guess, taking care of our people to ensure they're kind of able to work here a long time, have happy lives, and obviously produce the results we want for CalSTRS.
Absolutely. I think it goes without saying that we wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for the collective efforts of all of our staff. And to the extent possible, each member of the leadership team from Benefits and Services strives to incorporate recognition activities and ongoing discussions around where the stress points are. And I can certainly allow any of the directors to comment that might have some specifics relative to what those recognition efforts are. But I will say that one of the key areas that has been on the minds of our staff as we transition through this is there wasn't an understanding of the difficulties going into the project. And one of the things that they were raised or hopefully felt that they were heard were two concerns, particularly as it relates to disability and survivor benefit. And that is being able to have an even greater number of resources than those supplied by the student assistants, those supplied by the 25 blanket positions that we had mentioned previously. That's one component. The other component, in actuality, is the environment that we've been in and uncertainty around what the scenario will look like in the fall relative to daycare, relative to return to an opportunity to not have to worry about children at home. And many of our workforce within Benefits and Services are in those parenting years that have that as one of the primary concerns that they're juggling while also doing the work. So with that in mind, relative to that piece of it, the leadership team within Benefits and Services has taken the more cautious approach. We are not going to be the trailblazer in terms of looking for a path post-pandemic, and want to ensure that those changes we anticipate to see in the fall come to fruition prior to making any decisions on what that blended environment would be at some point in 2022. So that is the reason really for our reserve in putting forth specifics on that return, because we want to remove that element of concern. And we do recognize that one of the components is that level of uncertainty. It's like, we'd like to know right now what that final mix is going to be. And you've probably read in the press that there are many corporations, both in public and private sector, sort of wrangling with this task, being cognizant that we have seen great benefits and takeaways, quite frankly, from the work we've been able to do remotely. And so how do we finalize and blend what we've learned, incorporate that, while also ensuring that element of collaboration and sustainability towards the culture is also in the forefront. So that's one component. The other being workload assistance. With regard to DASB in particular, we are in the process of adding 7 additional blanket positions for DASB, and we've spread that out across the various elements of seniority, including one of which is actually a management position. Speaking to one of the slides where we reference management burnout. So as you add staff, of course, the span of control for each individual increases. And we didn't want to ignore that in the scenario, even though one might think, well, wouldn't it be best just to add as many analysts as we could? We did want to be mindful to our management team as well. So with that in mind, there have been 7 that are in process for disability and survivor benefit, and 4 additional that are in process for service retirement, the 2 areas of highest impact.
Great.
And Melissa, if there's anything that you would like to add to that.
Yeah. Melissa, did you want to add something to that?
Sure, I'm happy to go after Cassandra, though I saw her hand up if you'd rather take in that order.
Okay, all right, Cassandra.
I was just going to add something just briefly about the transition of all of our recognition events into a virtual platform environment. And we have done that as an organization from an enterprise-wide level, but I really want to acknowledge the work that the division directors have made in really trying to create some sort of interactive and meaningful environment while working in different locations and still maintaining some sort of level of connectivity. It is not, it's not lost on us that this is very hard for everybody in the organization, and particularly everybody's individual scenarios and situations that they're working in. But our organizational development and then the division directors in benefits and services have really done the heavy lifting at trying to maintain a highly engaged workforce in CalSTRS. So I just wanted to let you know that there is a lot of effort and thought put into that.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Melissa?
And I'll just piggyback on that. Those were really where my comments were focused on, is the leadership teams and the divisions, not just disability and survivor benefits. I think we all have really tried to create a virtual environment that still supports our CalSTRS values that we have in the building. And so some of the things that we've done in our area with disability and survivor benefits, the leadership team creates some fun activities. They'll have a chance to come play bingo, for prizes at lunchtime for 30 minutes. And we really celebrate the successes, of which there are many, as you can imagine, in this type of environment, when we're really strategizing every week to provide the necessary support for pension solution while also serving our members with the most critical aspects of the work in the different business areas. I think some of the other ways that we've been able to support our staff through this is really supporting that flexibility, like Bill mentioned, trying to find ways to create more capacity for them. Having those student assistants helps by relieving them of some of the more general tasks so that they can focus on the work that's most critical to serving our members or designing and testing our new system. So those are kind of the comments that I wanted to add in response to the question.
Thank you. And it just kind of adds to what Sharon said. It's the culture and it's the who we are and who we serve, and it's important to really make sure that our staff is well equipped mentally and physically, and just in general, just knowing that you are supported by us as a board. So thank you. I see Denise and then Joy.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for working so hard during these trying times. I know it's been extremely difficult working from home, as we all have been. I also wanted to say that I did have a Pension 2 question and got my personal service just calling in as a member, and really things are going off without a hitch for those board members who haven't had that experience. And I also wanted to highlight, if people don't know, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who sees it, CalSTRS Communications does have an Instagram account, and various members of our staff have been highlighted there. And it's really great to see and to get to know everyone, especially since we haven't been able to be in the building and see people firsthand. So I just wanted to encourage everyone to subscribe to that if they aren't, so that you can and this goes for our viewers as well, so that you can get to know our CalSTRS staff a little bit more up close and personal. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
TikTok
Denise.
next. TikTok.
Thanks, Denise. Joy.
And so thank you, Bill, Cassandra, Melissa, and I, like Denise and Sharon, just want to add my gratitude for all of you and all of our team members who are just doing tremendous work under really difficult circumstances. I actually had have a teacher who was a teacher for one of my children who is nearing retirement, and she just kind of in a social encounter shared that she had questions about retirement planning and called, and people were able to get back to her really quickly, answer all her questions, and it was a really great experience. So based on both what you report, Bill, as well as based on just kind of a feedback that I received personally from someone I know, we know that everybody has done an amazing job, even under these circumstances. And I guess I like many of you, I'm a planner, and I'm probably like your staff, Bill. I'm a planner. Like I want to know, so like, what's my schedule going to look like in July and August, and when exactly are the board meetings that we're having? Like those are things that I try to do, and it can be stressful when we don't have those answers. But having that flexibility, and I think I appreciate that you and the leaders are taking that flexible approach, which is to say, we don't know yet, and we want to be able to use the best information that we have when we get it. That I think is how we're handling it in my own workplace. Of still lots of questions about how things will change, whether and how we bring people back in, or what kind of flexibility we give, we can provide to employees who have, shown that they're really capable of, doing what we need to do for our members. So thank you. And thanks everyone.
Thank you. No one else in the queue? Well, I just kind of want to piggyback onto what Joy, as far as flexibility, it just seems like that's the major word for these last 14 months is flexibility, and the ability to be able to have a casual conversation at times without making an appointment on Zoom or doing things like that. So, I really appreciate the flexibility that you and the leaders on benefits and services have provided, as well as the major enterprise of CalSTRS. And then one more thing of personal note is that I had a friend called me and with a problem on her retirement issues, and she didn't know what to do because she was getting the runaround from her district, from her county, and she didn't, what do I do? I can't find anybody to give me the right answers. So I hooked her up with retirement readiness. And the person that worked with her, the staff that worked with her, went over and above, and she just can't say enough about CalSTRS staff. And in fact, she says, is there a way that I can nominate this staff for some kind of an award? And I was told by Cassandra and even Melissa and Sandy that, oh yes, there is an award that members can nominate somebody on the staff for recognition. So I was really happy about that. So hopefully she follows through, and just want to thank all the staff for, over and above during these trying times that we're all going through. So thanks again. So anyone else that wanted to say something on that? Okay, did you want to close on that, Bill?
Yes, I have no further. I believe I saw Frank had his hand raised. No?
Oh, I think he was clapping, right?
Oh.
Were you clapping, Frank?
Sorry, I didn't
Was
catch
virtually clapping, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks a lot, and thank you, staff. Okay. Let's see, I think we'll go now to the work plan, item number 4. Bill, you and I talked about the work plan. So do you want to kind of go over some of the things that we had talked about?
Yes, for the proposed work plan for the coming year, we're looking at, and I don't know if we can bring up that slide that has the various components that we're going to be looking through. If not, I can just read through those.
I think
that was
we all have access to that, right?
okay. So for purposes of our research items, we're going to be looking at 3 elements. One would be the annual member satisfaction survey in September. In January, the triennial health study, and then in May, the segmentation study, which for some of you may recall that was previously known as the demographic study, and it's been an evolution on that study. In terms of committee education items for September, per our discussion, Karen, we have the death benefit update, and that is missing, as you mentioned accurately, on the upcoming agenda. So we'll be sure to have that corrected, but that will be covered in the month of September. Then in January, we have member education and engagement efforts from Retirement Readiness. And in May, employer engagement and outreach progress from Employer Services. And then finally, for governance in September, we'd have the review of the committee charter, followed by input on the 22-23 committee work plan in May.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on that? And then just to kind of the September, the death benefit update, it's just like mostly the reason why I wanted to put that on everybody's radar is just, I kind of wanted to know, the last time we heard about it was in November of last year. And it's just the unclaimed benefit issues. And I just want to know, even if there's no change, I just kind of want to know what the status is of that. And it's could be a very brief informational item. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else have anything that they want to look at or add? Okay. So moving on, we don't have to take any action on that. Any comments? Any callers in the queue for this particular item?
No callers in the queue for this item.
Okay. Going on to number 5, I didn't hear any information requests. Did you, Sabia?
I didn't have any, no.
Okay. All right. And then number 6, as Bill alluded to, the draft agenda. Anyone looked at that? So in addition to that, we're going to add the death benefit update.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go with the draft agenda. And then opportunities from the statements of the public. I think we have somebody in the queue.
Yes, we have one caller in the queue.
Okay, thank you.
Can we get the timer up, please?
We have the timer.
Our first caller is Raquel. Raquel, go ahead.
Hi, yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Hi,
go ahead.
thank you. I appreciate giving me the time today. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Raquel Stevens, and I'm a CalSTRS member, and this is my 30th year in education. I'm currently a district administrator in Irvine Unified School District. Oh, thank you. I'm speaking today to advocate my situation with CalSTRS regarding a law that affects a very small number of cases within CalSTRS. It would be for members that are in a similar situation as myself. Let me preface this by saying that I was a victim of domestic violence, Orange County case 18-041720. This event had a profound impact on my life and the resulting 2 years of criminal and civil proceedings. And unfortunately, CalSTRS was also a member of those proceedings. There is a provision in CalSTRS 22661H that states that if the service credit is very small to a non-member that is not vested, the system, CalSTRS, must refund the account to the non-member. 22661H. This makes sense because the non-member would not be eligible to receive retirement payments since they weren't vested, and unless they had some way to acquire additional service, they would not be able to obtain them. So a refund in these cases is totally appropriate and equitable. This is the provision that my attorneys and I used to write the court order, and this provision would also then allow the member to repurchase those lost years from the community property. There is, however, another provision, 23200B, that is seemingly in conflict with this. It states that if and when a non-member spouse withdraws the contributions, then the member may redeposit. So in other words, this could potentially stall the process and prevent the member from recovering and purchasing the years based on the action or inaction of the former spouse. They could stall the buyback process or let this time simply run out until the member would be forced to retire and then would be locked out of those years. This would be inequitable and conflict with the other provision that shows the minute service must be paid out. Right now, I've been advocating for this and believe that the law 22661H trumps this provision, 23200B, that the non-member must be refunded the small amount of service and therefore allowing the member to repurchase because it is such a small amount. My attorneys and I have based the quadro on this, and it was signed by the court. I have written to the ombudsman, I think that's how you say it, for CalSTRS, and he agrees with me that 22661H to provide a refund in my case to the former spouse. So my request today from the board is that they examine the law, they examine my particular case, and if needed, clarify the provisions and adjust wording as needed. I'm also asking the office that they allow me to repurchase those years. Thank you so much, Raquel Stevens.
Thank you for your comments. That concludes all the callers in the queue.
Right. All right. Thank you so much. And I think that concludes the business of the committee. I want to again thank everyone for being on the call, and thanks everybody on this committee. I know this is a short committee, and it's usually at the end of the 3 long business days that we have, but I really appreciate everybody's interest, input, and concern for all the things that we need to do to make CalSTRS what it is today and to continue the good work. And I'm kind of sad that this will be the last one that Jack will be in, but I think it's life is impermanent. We've got to go with the changes and just kind of keep moving on, right? We just change our clothes a little bit and move on. So I think now it's time for our lunch break. And then after that, we will come back at 1 o'clock when we will celebrate Mr. Jack Enos. Okay, so we'll come back. See you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday afternoon. We're kind of at the last part of our CalSTRS board meeting. So welcome to the public. Welcome back, board members. Hope you had a good break, a good lunch. Typically these days are packed full of action items and important decisions that we make about the CalSTRS system. But I think probably one of the most important decisions we made, not myself, and I don't think anyone in this room, but 19 plus years ago, was to hire Jack as the CEO. And so we're going to take a break from the usual business and take some time to recognize our very special and amazing Jack Enos, who's retiring after nearly 20 years as our CEO. So I can't believe we're here. We've been talking about this for a while. And so I just wanted to give people a kind of a preview of what we're going to be doing today. There's going to be a couple of different phases. And I think folks know when they're coming in, but I'll make some opening remarks. Then we'll have the controller, Frank from the treasurer's office, Karen Yamamoto, a chance for board members in open session. We'll also have closed session time. And then some public comments. So the public is available to share on their comments to Jack as well. So I don't know I don't know how to start, but just to say, Jack, I just don't think any of us are going to be able to kind of come up with the words to express how much we appreciate you as a leader, as a person, as a Renaissance man. I have a lot of kind of reflections, but I first wanted to, before we all go into gushing over how amazing you are, Jack, is I did want to, if Cindy is watching, your wife, Cindy, I just want to thank her, because we all know none of us get here without our incredible family teams. And Cindy's a leader in her own right. So Cindy, thank you for lending Jack to us all this time, and just appreciate your partnership. You guys are a model to me of a true power couple of both leading organizations in your own right, but also raising children and contributing to Sacramento and that life. So really appreciate Cindy's support, and the rest of your family too, of course, for just agreeing also to agree to put your retirement plans on hold. I was thinking back, I've been reflecting back, like a lot of us have been, on the last 15 months, and thinking about, around March last year. And you had announced your retirement last year, and we were all preparing for that. And then COVID hit, and I think we just kind of were all a bit in the days of the first weeks of trying to navigate that, and not sure how long that would last. And I remember distinctly talking to Harry and talking to other folks to just say, what, in the midst of all of this, what do we do? And is it a good idea to start a CEO search during a global pandemic? And I think the answer was maybe not. Maybe we can take a year. And I remember reaching out to you and to Cindy and making sure your family was okay with you postponing for a year your retirement. And you were so gracious to say, sure, whatever's best for CalSTRS as per your usual ethos and your leadership. And so, we just appreciate you delaying your retirement for another year, so we could you could lead us through, our whole organization, through these challenging times, as well as give us time to have a really robust CEO search and find your successor. And so thank you for that, Jack. It just doesn't go without saying how important it was to have you at the helm through those trying times. So thank you for that. And so with that, and I think I just want to take up a point of personal privilege. I reflected earlier today about that trip we took, you and I and Harry and Chris, over to Europe. And I remember as a new trustee kind of going, oh my gosh, we're going to the Netherlands and to England, to London. And it was just such it was such an incredible education to learn from other global leaders in pension world. But I think just hearing people talk about you, I mean, just the global leader you are on sustainability really came through 9 years ago from colleagues from those visits. I have a lot of fond memories of the four of us walking around in Amsterdam and just having conversations about how CalSTRS can move forward, especially on climate change. And you've been an incredible champion on that, and have pushed us, I think, as an organization to think more critically in that area. So thanks, Jack. I'm probably going to, continue to lean on you even as you leave for ideas and connections. You have so many relationships around the world, and appreciate the influence you've had on all of us. So it'll be fun to celebrate you the rest of today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Betty and let you say a few words. Betty.
Thank you, Sharon, very much. While we may be all here to celebrate Jack's close to 2 decades of service to CalSTRS, Jack, I want you to know that we're also celebrating the extraordinary person that you are. As one of the ex officio members of this board, I have vast exposure to state leaders, and you are tops of the exemplary among them. Your commitment to the mission, the beneficiaries, and the staff has never wavered over your tenure. And your passion for sustainability, I have to say, is contagious, whether directed at fighting climate change on the world's largest stages, or just looking at how you're shepherding the construction of our LEED Platinum headquarters building. And it's just something that I just want you to know your contributions in terms of the culture of inclusion and excellence are core to the legacy you're going to be leaving behind. And I think the way that I would describe my experience with Jack is, the extraordinary person that you are is really pretty fundamental. And as we celebrate you, and it's really how you live your values, professionally and personally. And as our resolution from the State Controller's Office states, whereas Jack has been a friend to everyone he meets. Remind me of kind of like Norm on Cheers. It's like everybody's like, "Hi, Jack. Hi, Jack." And and your effectiveness as the CEO of CalSTRS is about the message and the messenger being one and the same. And I mean, we just never have to guess about you. Jack is Jack, and your tenacity in pushing the funding plan had your values written all over it. And the most important one being, it's all about the beneficiaries. And so your long tenure with the CEO of CalSTRS would lead one to question whether the organization will experience, what they call founder syndrome after you depart. So, whether the organization is going to cease to thrive. And I think we've all experienced how your priorities and interests over the course of the last 2 decades have always aligned with the mission of CalSTRS. So as you retire, know that your service and leadership leave us with what I call grounder syndrome. Where CalSTRS is centered, understanding that our North Star is attaining full funding, where CalSTRS is balanced, growing stronger, certainly under your leadership to tackle whatever may come in sideways to knock us off our course, and where CalSTRS is connected, always to our mission and delivering for our beneficiaries, but with one another through our culture and our proud brand. So on a personal note, I just have to say I've so tremendously enjoyed our purposeful sustainability work together on the series board and beyond. And so on behalf of the Controller's Office, and especially on behalf of Lynn Paquin, Karen Green-Ross, my deputies, we extend all best wishes to you, Jack, for a healthy, happy retirement, as well as tremendous and deep gratitude to Cindy for her support and understanding of the importance and honor of public service.
Oh, thank you so much.
Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks so much. The next resolution is from the Treasurer's Office. Frank?
It's too funny.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Jack, you have served CalSTRS as Chief Executive Officer for nearly 20 years. Thank you for your service and leadership. You devoted your career to promoting public understanding of the essential value of defined benefit plans to retirement security, as well as the positive economic impact that CalSTRS defined benefit plan brings to all Californians. Through your leadership, Jack, financial education and resources for California's educators have grown, including low-cost supplemental savings plans to help teachers enjoy a secure retirement. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much.
Through your service to CalSTRS and numerous organizations devoted to sustainability, shareholder activism, and retirement security, you spearheaded progressive environmental, social, and governance practices and oversaw the evolution of the system's robust corporate governance program. Again, thank you, Jack. Jack, at the request of the Teacher Retirement Board, you postponed your retirement to provide stable leadership through the challenges of the COVID-19 global pandemic. Thank you, Jack and Cindy. Following years-long efforts advanced by you, the defined benefit program is now positioned to weather whatever the future holds for generations to come through the CalSTRS funding plan. Thank you, Jack. And so, the great treasurer of the state of California, Fiona Ma, applauds, commend, and congratulate you on your retirement from state service and express her appreciation of gratitude for your continued service to the State Treasurer's Office, CalSTRS, and to the people of this great state. Jack, congratulations. Wishing you a long, happy, and healthy retirement. You will be greatly missed.
Thank you so much, Frank. Wonderful.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then on behalf of the whole board, it's appropriate that you're seeing that because Karen's going to lead us into the next president. She's always full of surprises. So Karen, on behalf of the board, is going to present a small token from us. Karen?
Okay. So Jack, here's where you open that big thing.
Okay. Do I do it now?
Yes.
Okay.
You want?
Yeah, totally.
You got to do what the teacher says, Jack.
All right, just a second. I'm going to take my background off. There it is. Huge. Oh, wait, is it on yet?
Yep, you're ready.
I can see you.
There we go.
So unwrap it.
All right.
What's going to happen is the staff is going to post it on there so I can read it.
What is this? Oh my gosh. You just, wait.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So it's on the screen, Jack.
It's got it on the screen. Okay.
So I'm going to read it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it. All right.
Oh, that's
all right. You ready?
Yes.
You ready? Dear Jack, dang, you've had a long hell of a ride at CalSTRS. Your extra enthusiasm and smarties have made CalSTRS a world-class enterprise. You know, at times it's been a rocky road and other times it's been bueno. But twixt it all, you made it good and plenty. CalSTRS is better because of your scores of exemplary projects.
Oh my God.
Look, you've led the team's quest to climb to the mountaintop. We all dove you and send you mounds of good wishes and hugs as you start your new chapter filled with cherished Mentos and good Heath.
Oh.
Take 5 and have a happy retirement now and later. In gratitude, the CalSTRS staff.
Incredible.
Thank you so much, Jack, for all that you've done.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. I've never seen anything like that.
Thanks, Karen. And
All
we
right,
also have
everybody wave your Jack picture.
There's an additional gift that you should be enjoying as well that we teamed up on with the staff that you'll get at a later date in a few weeks. So I'm sure you'll find hours of enjoyment with that.
Those things are freaking me out. That is really weird.
My kids said too.
So we'll take, I know, Frank, right? Frank, it is a little, yes, I see that. So we're going to take a few minutes just to open up the floor for board members, and then we'll go to the public. So any board members who want to speak, go ahead and raise your hand and I will give you the floor. Denise.
Lower my hand. Hi, Jack. I just wanted to say thank you very much for all that you've done for the educators of California. Most notably, your constant engagement with stakeholders and CTA. And I know that everyone appreciates how generous you are with your time, even though you're so busy. And I also wanted to personally thank you for helping me along my journey. I know we met, gosh, it's already probably been 10 years. I can't believe that.
It has been 10 years, my gosh.
Yeah, but helping me from baby retirement committee vice chair to learning all the things that I need to know. And I know that there's so much more to learn. I learn that every day. But thank you for your help along the way and for your patience and all the time that you've given to all of California's educators.
Oh, thank you, Denise. Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Denise. And as we have board members speak, I'm actually going to make one last, for the public members who are going to speak after this, I just wanted to verbally let you know the number to call in is 833-986-0555. So after board members speak, there's going to be a time for public comment. So if you would like to add to the celebration of Jack, feel free to call in and our staff will assist you with getting in the queue for public comment. So thanks for that. Thanks, Denise. Jennifer Erden.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Jack. Everything that has been so eloquently said absolutely resonates. And I think it was 18 years ago that we met. We haven't changed a day since then. But in the interim, what you've done is just truly, a remarkable and a distinguished career. And one with so very many contributions, with purpose and with heart, and excellent results. And as we all know, it's not easy, to do that. I also just want to say on a personal note that whenever we would come into contact, no matter what was going on, and I know there was always a lot going on, you would always take the time to stop and say hello, to meet the teams. You would remember everything about everyone and deliver and apply that in such a caring way, with empathy, with heart. And what that does for one's engagement, for one's culture, for the joy of what we do every day. Just thank you, and wish you all the best. I'm still looking for the right word for that active retirement.
I know.
Anyway, thank you, and congratulations.
Joy.
Great, thank you.
Joy I've known forever. Oh my God.
I was going to say, I'm not sure people know that Jack and I have known each other for a while. I think I actually had a chance to meet Jack and Cindy back when I worked for former Governor Davis. And Cindy and I kind of followed each other at the Department of Managed Healthcare. I also had a chance to meet Jack back when we were in the old building, when CalSTRS was in the old building, when I was a delegate for our former controller, Steve Wesley. We then kind of paused, and I didn't see a lot of Jack for a while, but then had a chance to come back and join the board as an appointee back in 2015 or so. And Jack, I've really learned a lot from you. Both kind of giving me your advice and education as I sort of learned how to serve on the board, as a delegate, learning Robert's Rules of Order, learning all the things that we have to learn when we first join a board like CalSTRS, learning about the system, learning about investments and delegation and many of the other things that we do as board members, but also about your leadership and your leadership style and your leadership shadow. Several board members have already talked about you being so respected as a leader on a global stage. But along with that, you're still a leader who, as Jennifer mentioned, the names and experiences of all the staff in the building when we were in the building. Our members and care deeply about our members and always think about them, I think, at the forefront of what we do. And I think I can say that I personally have learned a lot from that, and try to model some of those attributes in my own work, either on the board or as a leader in my other job. So thank you for your collegiality, for your your guidance, your leadership, and the kind of impact you've had on all of us at CalSTRS, but on me personally as well. So thank you.
Thank you. My gosh.
Bill.
Well, my goodness, I'm the person who probably has known you the least amount of time, Jack, but you have made such a great impression upon me. Your skills are Hall of Fame skills in terms of leadership. You have tremendous empathy. You've created and driven and instilled wonderful values in this organization, which transcend every corner of that big building that you helped put together. And all I can say is that I feel privileged and a little bit regretful that I've only had 2 years to spend with you. But I hope that our paths may cross in the future because you've made an immense impression upon me with your skillfulness as a leader. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share time with you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Bill. Gail.
Thank you so much. And I too regret not having more time to spend with you, Jack, but I do represent an organization for whom there's a long legacy at CalSTRS, and all of us, Jennifer's on too. We really wish you the very best. And because I think of your commitment to public service, I just want to reflect a minute on how incredible your service really is and how powerful it's been. I do think public service can, as Michelle Obama says, be a bright, hot, sharp spotlight. And I don't know that everyone always understands why we're called to it and why we do it and kind of how hard it is. And I think the truth is, like, the humility that you brought every day, nobody needs to understand it. You did it to be truly in the service of others and in the service of the educators who make by far the biggest difference in our state and our world. And it was the humility, I think, that brought you to really understand the risk of climate change and to lead our organization in that way. So I think that as all of us as public servants and all of us that do this really because we have that deep core of wanting to make a difference and serving others, I'm so grateful for what I've learned. And I do hope that you'll stay and really inspire all of us and the next generation of CalSTRS to really do the same. So thank you very, very much for all you've done for the state of California.
Thank you.
Keith.
Yeah, echoing everything that people have said, and perhaps building on it. You know, in the scheme of things, in the scheme of the universe, human life is so transient, and we have to appreciate those things that occur to us. You've had the opportunity to contribute, and I think that one of the things beyond just the immediate satisfaction that you can take is I don't know, I don't think it's luck, but it's just the opportunity that you've had to build an organization that continues on, and the staff that you've hired, the staff that you've built, the culture that you've built that will continue to live on. It will evolve, but I think that you can look back on that and take some satisfaction beyond the moment. And I think that's a real tribute to the action that you took, the ability that you brought to it, and the fact that you weren't afraid to make that, to dream and achieve. So for that, you know, I think, thank you very much. And it is enviable. Goal your life, the goal you achieved at CalSTRS is enviable, especially within the context of public service. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And Jack, as we transition, and again, we're going to have a little time in closed session as well. So, but the one last comment I'll make today, because I know a lot of us as board members do a lot of reading and watching the news. And, you know, we daily get, you know, articles about different pension funds around the world and CIOs and CEOs and staff drama. And I have to say, it's incredibly gratifying as a board member, I will say, you know, to not have to lose sleep at night about staff issues or, I mean, I just think it's an incredible record that you've established to be able to kind of, we've had, you know, rocky roads like Karen's mentioned, but, you know, to not have that kind of headache around headline risk with your leadership has been an incredible gift as a fiduciary of this fund. So thank you for that. That's much appreciated. So let's turn our time to the public comment. And I believe we have some folks on the line that would like to extend their gratitude to Jack as well. Samantha, can you have our first caller?
Our first caller is Orville. Orville, go ahead.
Leadership has been an incredible gift as a fiduciary of this fund. So thank you for that. That's
Hey, Orville?
appreciate it. Let's further time to.
We'll come back to Orville. Our next caller is Susie. Susie, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Did you say
Go ahead,
Susie?
Susie.
Okay, hi, this is Susie Chow from United Teachers Los Angeles, retired. And Jack, I don't know what to say. You know, we're going to miss you, but we want to thank you for all your years of service. And everything that I would want to say has been said or will be said. But I do want to share this one little story, which is when I was going to start attending the CalSTRS board, Loretta would tell me, you know, Jack is this, Jack is this, Jack is this, Jack is this. And I said, this man cannot walk on water. And when I met Jack, when I met you, yes, you do walk on water. So enjoy your retirement and congratulations. We're going to miss you terribly. So take care. Thank you so much for all your service. Bye, Jack.
Bye-bye, Susie. Very funny.
Okay. Our next caller will be Sandy. Sandy, go ahead.
Hi, Jack. This is Sandy Keaton. I'm going to keep it simple so I don't pull a Dana and start crying. I just want to thank you for being a very strong and caring leader of our retirement fund and for always, always welcoming all of us who participated at the meetings. There was never a time that you didn't say hello or ask how we were doing. And I want to wish you a wonderful, healthy, marvelous, fun retirement. Enjoy every minute of it. It's great.
Thank you.
And thank you again.
Sandy. So for our next caller, we're going to go back to Orville.
Okay.
Orville, go ahead.
Yes, this is Orville Garrison, president of CTA NEA Retired. Jack, we have met and talked, but on behalf of the statewide organization of CTA NEA Retired, we too want to congratulate you on retirement. We wish you the very best in your future. I will forever remember that at our annual issues conference, we always had many workshops arranged for people to attend, and there was never a year, there was never a time when your workshop was not packed. Our members were always interested in hearing what you had to say, and what you said was always very meaningful and very on the mark. And so thank you for that, Jack. From CTA NEA Retired, congratulations.
Thank you. I will miss you all.
Thank you, Orville. Our last caller is Ed.
Ed.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Ed.
You know, I have so many good things to say about you and your global leadership and your personal friendship that I started a little early yesterday. We've known each other for about 17 years. And over that period of time, I've been impressed with your expertise and ability to be an effective communicator, so our members could gain a better understanding of our retirement system and the benefits they are enjoying. I remember talking with you, with your former colleagues from Colorado, as they lamented to me they didn't keep you in Colorado. In the years you have been our CEO at CalSTRS, you have never forgotten your roots. As a stakeholder for 64 years, I've been impressed with your ability to listen and understand the many challenges facing our retirement system. You have brought a strong sense of confidence to our membership. As our CTA CalSTRS CEO, you have surrounded yourself with an outstanding staff. as you move into retirement, your legacy bodes well for the future of CalSTRS. I could go on and on. In the interest of time, I want to say thank you with a deep sense of gratitude as a global leader and a dear friend as you join us as a retiree.
Yes.
We know you will always be involved in making life better. The difference is that, Jack, you do it when you want to do it. Take care, keep safe, and do it while you can. Thank you.
Great comments, Ed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's fabulous.
That is all the callers we do.
Great, thank you, Samantha. And I have to say, Jax, Sandy mentioned Loretta, and many of us are going to her memorial next Friday. And if she were still alive, I know she'd be on that line and cracking us up. And so I just had to think of her face right now as we're listening to public comment, that I know she'd have plenty of fun things to say about you too. So it's just a legacy to, you know, how you kept the members at your heart, even with all the global work that you've done.
It's such a, can I just say a few words? Do you mind just?
Yes, absolutely. Of course. It's your turn now.
Well, I'm not making a speech, but first of all, I know this is ending well, because first of all, my hair is still a natural color. I have low cholesterol. My blood pressure is solid. And my skiing's still not as good as Sydney's, but it's still pretty good. So, you know, I think we've got a good launching pad here for my next endeavor. It's funny, I can remember like yesterday when I interviewed with the board for this job in 2002. It's funny how your mind works. And I can remember that night vividly. Sydney and I had never been to Sacramento. It was raining cats and dogs. It was foggy. We had no understanding of the weather and climate here. And we thought, my God, it must rain here all the time. It's so green. Little did we know, it's never rained again. And so we've really grown to love this community. You know, I've worked in 4 state governments, and the cultures of state governments are all different, but the people that are attracted to public sector work and are in leadership roles, just like what Gail said a few minutes ago, it offers just incredible intellectual experiences that you don't get in the private sector. And I've worked in the private sector, but there is nothing like it working in these environments. And I would say California, and Sacramento particularly, is just such an incredible, wonderful environment to keep you stimulated, interested in ideas, and doing it in a progressive environment. And when I took this job, you know, my mind went off and I said, you know, I'd done a lot of different things. And I said, I'm going to do this for 5 years. This looks like a good gig. This is going to be fun. And it was fun. There was so much to do, so much to evolve. And you've seen the fruits of our labor, the whole organization. And then I thought, well, you know, maybe I'll do this for 10 years. This is pretty good. I'm going to keep doing this. And then, of course, the recession came. And I said to myself, there's no way I'm retiring during the Great Recession. I have to work past that. And then we worked on the funding plan, and we started to see movement on that. And then sustainability started to get traction. Then the pandemic came. But basically, it's just been a trail of interesting zigs and zags of opportunities. And underneath all of that, it's fun to see the private sector now toying with this. They're not toying, but trying to play with this idea of purpose in their business. And for those of you that worked in the private sector, some companies probably do have a purpose, but others are uniformly profit motive oriented and are not focused on the member or the customer and what they do. And that's our power here. There's no doubt about it. You know, we always dress it up in that word fiduciary, but in the real language that we use, you know, we have real purpose that has dramatic impact on our members' lives financially. When so many people, when the data all points to a retirement crisis in this country, you know, this system, CalPERS, others like us, we're islands of security for our members. And it's been so rewarding to work in a business that has that inherent purpose. I don't have to create it. It's there for us. We just have to do it well. And we've just had strong alignment with our board, with all the people that called in. You know, those are our friends, our community of stakeholders. And then all of our staff. You can write rules ad nauseum about compliance and doing this and filling out this form and this filing, and you have to do that stuff. But if you don't constantly reinforce all of us working together in an ethical environment through the relationships, it doesn't work. Rules are insufficient to create that environment. There's no doubt about that. And I'm so pleased with the staff. In a few minutes, when I get to deliver my CEO report, we're going to talk about some stars that work for us and get this done. And it is, in fact, the whole organization that's created this success, obviously. And again, hats off to Cindy. We're heading off on as everyone knows, a 2-month camping trip, and we're going to celebrate her at the Olympic Museum in Colorado Springs. So that's coming up here shortly. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Jack. You might have to send out that photo to the board of the photo you captured of her little placard at the Olympic.
I will.
Cool. That was really cool. Anyway, we love you, Jack.
Thank you. All right.
So as you're not done yet, you've got one last CEO report. I know it's fairly brief, but it's apropos that you're kind of one of your last, reports is really about the future, succession planning. It's always thinking about how to have a deeper bench of incredible staff and incredible leaders in our organization. So I will hand it back to you for your last CEO report.
Super. Thank you, Sharon, very much. And we've highlighted some of these things during the proceedings already this week, like the changes in the budget and those items. So I won't spend time with that. But I wanted to start out just for a few minutes, if you would, on our recognition program and honoring 6 employees. And I think we have maybe all of them available here. We're going to show you a nice picture that we do of them to celebrate them. But I would tell you, I wish you could have been with me earlier in the week. We had this fabulous Zoom ceremony. Normally we would do it in person, but if I'm going to only be able to quickly describe each of these 6 people, but during that ceremony, employee after employee came up and talked about the accomplishments of these 6 people. And if I could have saved this as a recruiting video for this organization, it is so powerful. The comment, I was taken aback, even though I've done this now year after year after year. I was so taken aback this week by the comments made by our staff about the commitment of these 6 people, and you've not met any of these individuals because they're working every day. They're not in the positions that get to speak to you in board meetings, but they are working in some of our most significant projects and getting it done. And I'm so proud of them. And this program that we call Virtuosity, and these are our 6 virtuosos. So Danielle or Jonathan, if you can put the PowerPoint up just so people can see the photos of it, and I'll just quickly read. And then I'm hoping our employees are available just to turn their cameras on so you can see them, what they really look like, not just in these nice photos. But our first virtuoso is Alex Real. Alex, there's your photo. And Alex, are you here? If you are, turn your camera on. I don't have my screen big enough, but hopefully
I am here.
There you are, Alex. And Alex works as a learning and development analyst in our transformation readiness program. She's responsible for the design, development, delivery, and evaluation of all of our training activities and materials relevant to pension solutions. So you all get reports on this project. You know how important this is, but this is one of the most pivotal responsibilities in this program. Working collaboratively with our contractor training team and our business area trainers, Alex develops training guides, reference materials for the new system functionality so that we can understand how to use this new system, while independently and effectively training business area staff to provide the necessary training back to the divisional staff. So Alex, thank you so much. I'm so pleased you were recognized this year for as a virtuoso. All right, next up is Daniel Moore. Daniel, you turn your video on if you're available. And Daniel is a research data analyst with us. He works on our CIT team. It's our continuous improvement team. And he is responsible for performing complex statistical research related to our business process improvement, including systematic, technical, and best practices. He provides consultation on the feasibility and impact or potential of various projects and proposals in various business areas and with our stakeholders. And he's been providing documentation support, mapping systems, and focus groups. Daniel's part of our CIT group, which have been so instrumental in the support functions around the collaborative model and the 4 pillars. And again, I don't think we would have been successful with this without the efforts of our CIT team. And Daniel, it's great to have you recognized here. Next is James Jung. And James, there he is. He oversees the Technology Services IT Asset Management Program. He develops and maintains our life cycle methodology that's aligned with industry best practices, while also establishing and maintaining the asset management procedure model that contains detailed definitions of functions, tasks, roles, and responsibilities. He plays a vital role to make sure that this process is integrated into all of our IT services. So again, very technical jobs, but so important to what we do. Thank you, James. Lori, if you want to turn on your video. And Lori's been very involved in helping us manage some of the pandemic issues for the organization. So she's been a very key person here. She is our labor relations specialist and quite a busy person. She reviews and analyzes control agency and organization-wide projects to identify impacts to our workforce. She's responsible for monitoring, analyzing proposed legislation, regulation revisions or establishments, bargaining union agreements, control agency guidance impacting classification recruitment functions. And she develops and implements strategies for communicating changes to leadership and staff while advising them on interpretations of contractual language. Every employee at CalSTRS gets an email from Lori every day for the last 14 months, again, checking on the level of COVID infections in the organization and the proper reporting around them. She's been such a key person here. And next we have Mia Tenoya Hill. There's her picture. Hopefully you're turning your camera on. Mia is a training analyst in our employer services training and development team. So again, around our employers that service us here. Mia designs, develops, and delivers training related to the laws for our staff, or for business areas, for the employers and stakeholders. She is a subject matter expert on the law and the code of regulations, and she researches and analyzes laws, regulations, procedures to ensure all of our materials are consistent with business practices and assisting our staff with review of employer documentation for compliance. Thank you, Mia. And then last, we have Stephanie Hill in HR. Stephanie is the manager responsible for our performance development program. Throughout the year, this program expanded to a team charged with managing and directing the development, modification, implementation, and maintenance of all of our policies, procedures, and processes to continually improve our enterprise-wide services. She works collaboratively with the general counsel, our EEO officer, labor relations, human relations leaders, and leadership, and she provides expert legal guidance and support on complex cases and makes recommendations on very sensitive performance management issues. Thank you, Stephanie. So those are our 6 virtuosos for the year. And we just so excited about their contributions. And as I said, it was a fabulous, fabulous recognition. And they are CalSTRS. They really are the organization. They represent the spirit, the contributions, the commitment of this organization. So I so appreciate what you said earlier, but I want to recognize this is a strong, deep organization reliant on the talents of individuals like the 6 we just recognized. So thank you, everyone. Let me just finish up with 2 points that in the report, and we are done with my final CEO report. Wow. On Path Forward, you heard a little our transition out of the pandemic. We conducted a town hall, as I indicated there. There were a considerable number of questions by the staff, actually, on vaccination issues and the health issues still. It somewhat surprised me. And Marcy at Frost at CalPERS volunteered to have her chief medical officer do one of my CalSTRS Tonight shows next week to talk about vaccinations and health and where things stand. So we will have their physician do that with me next week to kind of give reassurances to the staff. But each of the branches is putting together a plan for how they will start to approach this. But they're not too dissimilar, other than to say we're focusing on shortly after Labor Day to start to bring back those that makes sense to bring back, and kind of view that September through December period as the point at which we get our game down and understand how to just bring it all together around the healthcare issues. Hopefully we're getting used to the new health rules by then, and people can feel safe and comfortable working in the building. But we will have people working all different variations, from some that will maybe almost permanently home, to some that are in a hybrid situation, to some that will be working fairly permanently in the office. So that involves lots of management issues. And I can't say enough about technology. Meetings that I've had where there are people coming in remotely, but then there's others in the room, they are you can hear everyone's voice, but they're complicated to get everyone in a similar footing in the conversation. They just are. There's a lot of behavioral change that awaits us here to successfully manage conversations in a hybrid situation. I actually think this is going to be tougher than what we thought was the toughest, which was sending everyone home and just start working at home. You will have to have some patience, I think, through December, figuring it out and making sure that we can be successful with that. And then the last thing I would touch on real quickly is just, I wanted to give you an update on the headquarters expansion. I don't know yet when your first meeting will be in the building, whether it'll be in September or a different month, whatever you're targeting. If it is September, it's likely that the skin on the building will be well along the way by that point in time. But just to focus on the three risks, I think that's the part that's most important to talk about. At the very end of the report, there's changes in all three. On the risk that initially I thought was the one that scared me the most, which was the delivery of power from PG&E. Frankly, when we started the project, and given all that was going on in our energy environment, I was deeply worried that they could meet our expectations. And I am pleased to say that risk will not be on the report. We have completed the installation of power and the testing of that power. There's a few small things to do, but that will not be a risk to the project. So that's excellent. The second risk is COVID. I think we've indicated to you we're spending $50,000-$60,000 a month on the project for COVID accommodations, between the extra time it takes for laborers to check in, the supplies that are needed, the cleaning of things. So when we kind of get a clear closure with OSHA requirements, I think you've all read the stories in the paper. They're getting to closure, but they're not crisp that we all understand them yet. So when we get to that point here, hopefully soon, I'm really hoping we can no longer have that cost to the project and pick up a benefit of $50,000 or $60,000 a month, because we do need that in our contingency. And then the final risk, which has turned out to be the most arduous, is getting the final permits on the building. We are on the fourth permit. We have provided all of the our best thinking to the fire marshal's office. I've spoken with them now. Literally, as we're having this meeting, they are working on our plans as we speak. So they're not sitting around waiting in a queue for someone to do something with. The fire marshal staff are actively working on the plans. But I don't know, and you'll hear from Cassandra when she does this report, what the results of that review will be, whether or not we need another round. That's not uncommon in these cycles, that there's another round, but we don't know yet. But as you saw in the report, this has driven costs. They're up to about $4.5 million that this has pulled off the budget. So we certainly don't want it to go much longer, for sure. But as the moment, you said, are we on budget? We are on budget at this moment. Even though the schedule has been moved forward, we still had enough room in the contingency to address the current delays. But it's getting tight. It's getting tight. We can't experience much more than we have already. So that's where that is. So that's my final report.
Any questions from board members? I know there's a lot more in the report than what you covered, like governor's budget and other things. So, but I don't see any questions.
All right.
Your last report was very comprehensive, Jack. Well done. So I don't. Oh, go ahead, Gail.
I just quickly to congratulate Madam Chair, and I know maybe we're going to do this, the virtuosos. I think that is just such a special thing you do, and just a special congratulations to those folks. They clearly work very hard, and just a huge debt of gratitude to your team and that idea, which I really think is very lovely. Thank you to them.
Thank you, Gail. Absolutely. And those photos are so nice. I mean, those are really well done. So
they are
great. All right. Samantha, do we have any members from the public that wish to speak on this item?
There are no members of the public in the queue.
Wow.
Okay. So with that, we are going to close our open session. We still have board members a few moments in closed session. So, but for open session, I don't know, do you want to adjourn us, Jack?
We are adjourned. This is the final sign off. I can't remember what they used to say on the news, but this is it. Goodbye.
All right. We'll see you in closed session. Thanks, everyone. Members of the public. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye. Good afternoon, everyone. The board has met in closed session. Nothing to report out of closed session. And we are adjourned for the day. So we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.